Okie dokie. So, here we go. Let me make sure I got this thing properly moved up here. Okie dokie. Well, hello everybody. Welcome once again to my channel. Today I wanted to, not impromptu because I've been thinking about it a lot. I wanted to talk about a couple of movies for this episode. And they're sort of it's a filmmaker review technically, but it's only two movies for that most part. The first movie is going to be Robert Eggers' The Witch, although it looks like a double V, and that people keep joking since it came out that it's The Vich or The Vavitch, The Vavitch, which is hilarious. And then the other movie is a movie that I have fallen in love with recently, known as The Lighthouse. Let's see if I can get a good image there. That movie, I didn't see it in theaters, but a couple of my friends showed it to me recently, a few weeks ago, when we had one of our friends in from out of town. I have fallen in love with it. Not even joking. Like I'm obsessed with it. So I'll be talking about The Witch and the Lighthouse by Robert Eggers. He and his brother Max, I believe it's Max Eggers. I'll check just to be double sure. But both of them are brothers, and they have put this movie out. And wow, it doesn't even say on the back of this thing. Funny. Anyway, so I wanted to do a little double feature just because I've had it on the mind. I might as well vent and let it out and talk about what I loved, what I hated, yada, yada, yada. As always, before we begin, spoiler warnings for both The Witch and The Lighthouse. I don't like holding back. So if you haven't seen these movies and you want to, go and watch them and then come back and see what, if you're interested to see what I have to say about it. Just get a little bit closer just because I keep getting pushed back by gravity and crap. So, I got my Hawaiian shirt on. I got my mother of pearl beads. My girlfriend made these for me. I got a matching bracelet stuff. Mother of pearl is one of my favorite stones, and it's fitting because we're talking about the freaking lighthouse. So a movie that has a lot of nautical and aquatic symbolism and references and things like that. So I'm totally in the zone. Today was a beautiful day. I got a lit scented candle over here. I'm totally zen right now. I'm meditated. Oh, and also it's gin time, of course. So let's go ahead and take a sip. Today's episode, just so you know, is technically not brought to you at all because they're not sponsoring. Opulent Gin. This is an American gin, which I'm always wary about American alcohol only because I feel like only a few people know how to do it right. But I bought this stuff on a whim. Opulent Gin. It's actually pretty good. I would definitely recommend it. It wasn't that expensive. And even though this country doesn't, there's certain trades we have trouble with, I actually think it's a really good gin. So I definitely recommend it if you're looking for something different. It has a very subtle bitterness to it, but also it has a definitely noticeable flavoring of botanicals and juniper, in addition to all the stuff they mix together. You can look up all the specifics in terms of what goes into it, but personally, I'm into it. I like Opulent, so Opulent, if you're listening or watching this video and you want to send me free stuff, by all means, I'll take it. It's definitely not like some of the other ones. Actually, what am I talking about? I think I've only featured one gin on here that I actually hated and didn't recommend. And most of it, though, is still pretty good. But you're either a gin person or you're not a gin person. So anyway, today's episode is brought to you, I guess, by that. Actually, it's not brought to you. I need to stop saying that. There's probably legal ramifications for saying that. I don't know. So I like this stuff and I'm drinking it. So there you go. That'll be gin time. Good old American gin, I guess, technically. Anyway. Here we go. So, the reason that I'm talking about both of these movies, a few weeks ago, one of my best friends, Cameron, was in from out of town. If you've seen technically my previous videos before I started doing this stuff, I have a really dumb video where I grabbed a Crystal Head vodka skull and made a joke that, hey, Cameron's back in town. Oh God, Cameron, you transmuted into a glass skull with a bunch of booze in it. What happened to you, man? Who did you piss off or whatever? And it started out, it was just a little joke, but my friends loved it and ran with it. So anytime they see that Crystal Head vodka, they're like, oh yeah, let's grab some Cameron. So I can somehow accidentally make random crap like that work. I don't know why. Anyway, he and his fiance Holly were back in town visiting, and when we knew they were coming in, a couple of my friends, Alex and Rick, shout out to you guys, went and saw The Lighthouse, and they went and saw it in theaters. I guess they both were gonna, I don't know what they were anticipating exactly. I could probably have to go and ask them, but they saw it and apparently they said, hey, when Cameron gets in, we need to get Wes and Cameron drunk or something, and get them to watch this video because this movie's insane. And I think they were showing it to us because I think they were thinking Cameron would know how to make good jokes about it, and Wes would just flip out and not get it. And not, I don't know. I think they were thinking I would flip out and not get it because I think they think I'm not into artsy stuff. But here's the thing: me 10 years ago, I was not into artsy stuff 10 years ago. I pretended to be. I thought I could kind of get it, but mostly I was just a weird, irritable, pissy kind of guy that had very, very hipstery, particular tastes. Um, but I mean, having seen like the Holy Mountain and a variety of other things, even like a couple of years ago when my friend he threw a surrealist party together, and he had a bunch of like random videos on a YouTube playlist, most of which were like public domain, free to watch kind of stuff, or just stuff that you can watch because it was like foreign stuff or whatever. And again, I fell in love with it. I think it's like a fun way to exercise your brain. You're watching something, but you're interpreting all the mysticism behind it. You're getting the literature behind it, the lore behind it, the mythology behind it, the specific reference behind it, whatever. I mean, I have fun doing that now. I didn't years ago, but now I actually like. There's something about it. It's like you can meld and mesh all of the dots and connect all the dots and put all those because the reality is there's not very many original ideas. We all get influenced by somebody. Heck, I wrote a book that was referencing and influencing other things, like, from video games to art to movies to TV shows, even just technically in some cases to music, but not as much. But still, we all get influenced by stuff. Anyway, my friends got drunk. We all sat around the couch, turned the lights off, and they showed us the Lighthouse. And I love it. I'm in love with this movie. I think there's so many fun things to analyze, and even if you don't want to analyze it, you can still be just taken aback by all the beautiful imagery and all the shots and things like that. But then I don't want to get too involved in the Lighthouse just yet because I watched it. I've watched it several times since I've gotten my own copy, and then at some point I realized that, you know what, this guy made The Beach, and that was back when he was really indie, and it was really indie filmmaking. But everybody raved about it. They were like, this guy made like these filmmakers, Robert Eggers, or at least him and his brother together. That force might be, potentially like the next vein of very on the line to be like classic filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick and stuff like that. I put it off for years just because it was one of those movies where I was like, I need to watch it, but I'm not really into horror. I'm not really a horror guy. I understand it. I respect it. I personally don't get anything out of horror. I think that maybe it's just one of those things where I'm naturally a paranoid individual. I'm naturally an anxiety rattled individual. I'm naturally a kind of person to where like fear is a very understandable thing that I kind of have to work against because I don't know, like we live in a post 9/11 world, or you hear about shootings and stabbings that like happen in your neighborhood, or what, or even things like that. And it's something that I've in addition, it's just, and maybe bad things have happened to like myself and my family, and fear is not something that I get any sort of weird kick out of. And an entire genre like horror and gothic genres are ones that specifically dabble in fear and the psychology of fear, and even supernatural elements and cultural elements, which sometimes may or may not be tangibly fearful depending on who you are. Like I've heard people say, like, I mean, obviously, like we can take a classic horror movie like The Exorcist. I remember being in high school and there was like this one dude who's kind of a stoner, kind of not. He's just one of those weirdos. But I remember him saying like, yeah, everybody says The Exorcist is scary. I was laughing at it. There's nothing scary about that. And I was like, okay, well, obviously that meant that the majority of people who saw it, it spoke to something, it got something to them. It bothered them, it upset, it rattled them somehow. But yet some people are going to go, oh, this girl's like puking and walking backward down the stairs. Like, that's not funny, that's ridiculous. Oh, that's not interesting, that's funny, it's ridiculous. And demons we know aren't real, so obviously that's not going to affect me. Like, what is wrong? Like, this is clearly fantasy, you need to be laughing at it. I don't know. Obviously everybody's different. But like I said, I don't really like horror. There's only a few horror movies that I actually would want to watch. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is a great movie and is like very well shot. You can respect it even if, let's say, you're not into his films or anything like that. But I'm not a horror guy. So I kind of just subconsciously probably pushed the beach aside, and I didn't really want to watch it. But then like last week, I did manage to sit down and watch it, and I finally motivated myself to sit down and watch it. And it was not a good day to start. My grandmother wasn't doing well. I watched the movie and then tried to hang out with my parents a little bit, and then later on that evening, my grandmother passed away. I guess let me just do a quick gin time for my grandmother, Barbara Hughes. Gonna miss you, Grandma. So that was not necessarily the best day to watch this movie because, in hindsight, I was obsessing and reflecting on just how disturbing and weird and creepy the movie was, and then thinking back to like literally tragedy hitting me that day. So, but you know what though? It's those kind of experiences of like people will remember when major things happen. People will remember when they like certain things get announced in our culture, like in the Legend of the Five Rings role playing game. They had a list of the 20 questions, and there were 20 questions that forced you to develop and think about your character. And then one of them near the end is like we all remember moments in our life and our history that are technically big events. Like people know what they were doing when they heard that JFK was shot. And likewise, in my generation's time, people knew what they were doing or when what was going on when they heard that 9/11 was going on. Like the Twin Towers had fallen and they were attacked by two planes and stuff. So for me, the bitch is going to be like, yeah, I saw that movie like the day that my grandmother died, and it was just such a weird day. But I don't know, maybe that means something on some level. I don't know. I'm not going to read too much into it. So with that darkness aside, let me just talk about The Vitch first off. It came out a few years ago. Robert Eggers and team were really indie filmmakers, from what I understand, and it was a movie that premiered at film festivals, and it was so good, quote unquote. You know, quality-wise, it was sharp and people were talking about it. It got a better, broader release, and it definitely hit immediate cult status. So like last week, getting around to actually watching it, I was like, this is kind of interesting because it's been a few years after the fact. I do want to say that the movie is definitely quality filmmaking, quality visuals. The story is one that the tangible parts of it, the understandable parts of it, are actually I think really well done. It's like a movie about this family set during pilgrimage time in North America. I want to say it's the late 1600s. This family comes in there, and the movie opens up with this family, and apparently there's the dad. The family is at odds with the community. At a minimum, the dad is, and there's this council going like, are you going to let us fairly judge you, or what do you want here? And the guy was like, well, screw you, you're not going to judge me. And they're like, all right, fine, you're banished. You and your family got to go now. And so the guy, and it's like within the first 10 minutes of the movie, we learn that this family, for whatever reasons, is not quite, I guess they're blasphemous, or they just don't quite, or maybe they think that they're more fundamentalist than the Gospels or at the time, Protestant values of the time. And they get kicked out, so they go out in the middle of the nowhere. They find a spot where they think they can build their house and grow, and it's out in the middle of the woods and stuff like that. But like the thing is, and I think that's my issue with the movie is the beginning of the movie, the first 10 minutes of the movie. It feels like it should have been its own act, and they cut a lot of it out, and then they kind of compressed it into a basic idea, and that's supposed to be a precursor instead of an act. But the problem is that, and maybe it's just the initial shots are well put together, or the mood and the atmosphere, and also the immersion. This is a very immersive film. The dialogue, the wardrobe, it feels like you're watching these people in that time period. Like it's authentic. It's not just like, oh, they threw a few words or a few phrases in there, like, you know, praise be to thee or something like that. And then it's supposed to feel like, no, it doesn't feel like it is a movie set during that, like the pilgrimage time, the settlement time in North America by all of these Puritans or what have you. So that part is really well done, and it's shot from beginning to end. You feel that. But I think that's the first thing about it that turned me away is it felt like as this family's leaving, you're not getting an opportunity to learn about any of these people. You're not getting an opportunity to see like what is going on in this town, and they don't really answer the question of why the dad was kicked out, why the family's pushed out. We know that they were somehow on the offense, or maybe on the defense, depending on of whatever the common thought was. of that time, or what was accepted, religious laws and things like that. And all we know is that they're pushed out, and it's obviously like family. It's patriarchal, so it's like family father led. So obviously there's something going on there that will build up later. But like that, I think the movie kind of misses the mark in a few different areas. And the first big one for me personally, the first big one, the most I wanted to see more of this. Was just like again the beginning where right after they're told they're banished, and then there's this there's this dolly shot backward, or this reverse shot of it's a backing up shot is what I'm trying to say. The camera's backing up, but you see like you see these pilgrims in this community, in this colony. You see Native Americans. You see what look like Spanish. They look like guys that are like in the Spanish Armada. They might not be Spanish. They might have just been English mercenaries, or maybe like trans-European mercenaries. That's the thing. I don't know. I kind of want to do more research on that era to figure out like exactly because you see these soldiers, and maybe they're just town guards that are armored up, but it looks more like they look like Spanish. They look like Spanish or maybe Habsburgian era style soldiery, or Holy Roman Empire soldiery. But either way, whoever they are, regardless of which continental power, there's this frustration because there's a part of me that's like, ooh, like I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in this colony, this town, and how they work, and like everything from like the wardrobe looks authentic, and the way they're speaking is authentic, and you see these, and then you get to see like again this something about this. You see this dichotomy of here's the natives, here's the pilgrims, here's possibly these other allied powers with armed and stuff like that, and then this family's leaving that. And I think something about that, it's almost like and I don't know, it's not that there's a mystique to it. It's that from, I guess, a historian's perspective, like I want to see that. Like I actually want to, like I wish they would have had a broader first act that would have taken place there, that would have led up to how they got banished, and you get to see some of those people and how they interact. Even if at a minimum, just from like you get to see like a window into that, but you don't. That's the end of it. And this family's leaving before it even gets a chance to start. So there's something frustrating. There's something frustrating about that. And I actually was like, crap, I wanted to actually see what's going on in there. But, so that's the first thing that threw me off. Again, this is within the first 10 minutes of the movie. So that's the first thing I think where it kind of misses the mark, but maybe you could say there's a brilliance to that, because it makes you want to know what's going on, but fundamentally you can't. This is about a family that got pushed to the outside for cultural reasons, for religious reasons, for maybe legal reasons as well. And then they were like, screw you, we're done, or at least the dad was. So maybe there's the brilliance in filmmaking and the storytelling of like, oh, you kind of want to see what's going on in this community. Too bad these people aren't going to get to live in there. Why should you? So there's something about that I think is kind of tantalizing, but you could argue that's part of the artistry of the film. I don't know, the story crafting. But I would say for me, it's a miss the mark thing. And then, within this first 10 minutes, once that happens, you see the family, they build a house, you can tell they're like, praise be to God, we have a community now, we have this own little thing. And then, but then you see like this brand new, the oldest daughter takes their newest, infant son, I think his name was Samuel. He's like outside playing with him, or she's outside playing with this baby, a brand new baby. You can tell he's only like a few weeks, maybe a few months old. And she's out there playing with the baby. And she's like playing peekaboo with them, the thing that some parents do with their babies, like, where are you at? Where are you at? Boo! And then like the baby is supposed to get a reaction. And then while she's doing that, like when she covers her eyes, she goes, boo! And the baby's gone. And it's just, the baby's gone. And then she looks up and she notices there's like a rustling of like a couple of different trees off in the distance. And it looks like something like ran through there or walked through there for just like the span of a few seconds. And then she flips out and she's like, Samuel, where are you? And then it cuts to obviously like what shows this old witch who's cloaked, is taking the baby, and she's going back to her witch den. And then it cuts to like it's nighttime and it's candlelit, and you see like the baby is like naked, like on a table, and he's alive, and he's just doing his goo goo gaga thing that babies kind of do. And you see barely like the camera's zoomed in enough to where you can see a little bit behind him or around him, and you see like this naked old. You see the silhouette of like a naked old woman, and then you see her hands like kind of petting him a little bit, and then it reaches over and you see this knife, like she's bringing this knife to this baby, and then it cuts away to her doing something like with a like it wasn't a butter churner, but you can tell she was doing something nefarious, and then it cuts to some blood, and then I'm sitting there going like, oh my god, like this baby, like I'm just sitting there going, wait, like this is the beginning of the movie, and they just sacrificed this like a newborn. Oh my god, like this is fucking horrifying. Holy crap! Like I don't want to see this. You know, and I'm saying that like I'm not even kidding when I say I almost just stopped watching the movie when I saw that, because I almost was like, okay, this is not going to go in a good direction. Fuck. But I want to know what happens, and it's supposed to be a classic. Just watch it. It's fine. It's not real. Like it's one of those things where I have to, like, it's so disturbing. I have to remind myself it's just a movie. It's just a movie. Like that's how bad I got with that. And then it's obvious that this witch is so, and this is the thing. You even see the witch. She's doing something. She's brewing something. She's making something. It's dimly lit. You see like her naked backside while she's making something, and then you see her like for a bit like lying down, and then like right before it cuts back to the family, it's nighttime and the moon is full, and you see her. It's what looks like she's. At first you think like she's walking towards the moon, then you realize like she's hovering or she's flying toward the moon or something like that. Like she's just like slowly going up, and then you're like, wait, is this bitch flying? And then it cuts back to the family, and it's they're dealing with the fallout of like like the next morning or like a week later, and it's just, and of course the mom is like still faint and like crying and miserable, and but like anyway, so it's things like that. Like the intro of the movie basically tantalized me by making me kind of actually wanting to know what's going on in this town, but you don't get the opportunity to. And then it shows a baby getting abducted and sacrificed for a witch's dark rituals. I don't want to watch this. Oh, fuck me. Okay, I guess I'm going to keep watching it. You know, it's supposed to be well done. Well, after a while, the rest of the story continues. You know, there's the oldest daughter. The next youngest is their son, and then there's two twins who are little kids who were really creepy. Just on their own, they were kind of weird but kind of creepy, and they were playing around with this goat, and then the dad. You can tell the dad's got this really awesome voice. I don't know that actor. I hadn't seen him before anywhere, but the actor was interesting, and of course the mom is like, you can tell she looks like she's miserable and weathered just by having to go out there and having lost family already, and you know, cut off from their community and yada yada yada. It's one of those things where I was watching this, seeing where it was going, and I was like, okay, well, I am getting immersed by the dialogue and the way the house and the stuff looks, and there's other things in there that are just kind of sad and frustrating to watch, and natural tragedy and the psychology of this family. And of course, there's other things like, you know, this is a family living in a time where superstition was the science, if you will. So they were constantly referring and speaking about God and the Bible and being, you know, they're like even telling like a little lie was like sinning, and like they're like really worried about that. And it's like, this is the time period that, and it captures it really well. It's like a nice little encapsulation of this is what people in that time period probably were led by and thought and had to deal with and were worried about. And in a lot of ways, they were, even if they were different branches of Protestantism, they were like, you see this devout biblical understanding, but it was also very intense, and you can tell it was something that led and drove them. And they're constantly bringing those references into their life, and it's so common parlance. You realize that no wonder these people, when the possibility of dark things happening really starts to tear the family apart, it's understandable to see why, because that's what the time was like back then, and they were like legit worried about like witchcraft. Now I'm gonna say, I do need to say something. This movie is not an historically accurate movie. Yes, it is well researched and based off of events and accounts of people seeing and doing things, but like, you know, and even though we know it was a different time, like we know that actual witches can't like fly into the air. We know that there was a lot of dark hearsay and rumor that was spread by misinformation and cultural clash, and you know, people inventing these horrifying stories and spreading them. And there were a lot of things like misogyny, things that were culturally trying to keep women down and keep them chastised, and making men supposed to be God-fearing men, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. But we know, especially when we look at like the Salem witch trials, um, like even though it's weird, there's a phenomenon to it. Almost everybody has been saying, we know there wasn't actual, like now we know there was no actual fucking witchcraft. Not to say that people weren't doing Wiccan practices, or that Tituba, whatever that one slave woman's name was, who was potentially doing weird arts, or that they may or may not have freaked some of these girls out or whatever during the Salem witch trials. Here's the thing: we know that the Salem witch trials, we know historically, we know now that actual witchcraft are just simply spiritual practices. So there is a immediate moral side to go, even if you don't believe, even if you believe, like, let's say you're a diehard Christian, or let's say you're a diehard Christian, you know that, like, especially in America now, it's one of those things where, like, you have to acknowledge that other people have different cultural practices. But your neighbor down the street isn't actually doing magic to curse your family. Like, even if they say they are, it's like you invest yourself into curses psychologically. Yes, of course, weird things happen sometimes. I get it. I don't want people misunderstanding. Like, I do believe sometimes things happen that don't have a clear explanation. I do. I'm not gonna lie. Between Halloween and Christmas, my friend Rick showed me BuzzFeed Unsolved, and I was obsessed. I was watching this BuzzFeed Unsolved videos, like the whole stream. I watched it 2 or 3 times, with Shane and Ryan. And there were some videos that legit creeped me out. Like either it's demonic houses or unsolved mysteries, or like what exactly happened to this person. We have so much weird evidence and we can't figure it out. Things like that. That is kind of eerie. Sometimes it's fascinating. It just depends on how you want to look at it. But what I'm trying to get at is, in this movie, these witches, from the very beginning of the movie, it is established that no, witches are real. They are doing dark shit like abducting your children and sacrificing them for nefarious purposes. And then, by the end of the movie, I don't want to do too much time hopping, but I kind of need to get to my points here. By the end of the movie, we know that witchcraft is a dark thing, and it's obviously a pretty fucked up and evil thing. And of course, the devil is alive and responsible for making witches and doing these horrifying things to turn, tempting women into that direction, and then tormenting and murdering quote unquote righteous families and stuff like that. So that puts a very different perspective on, like, the time that, like, historically, when we look back, we know how people thought, but it was like, we kind of look at that and go, yeah, but a lot of that, 99% of that was, like, superstition and rigid, rigid Christian blending of moral thought and law, and there was a lot of unjust shit, like people being accused of metaphysical crimes like witchcraft and stuff like that. In this movie, it's weird because they kind of show you in the beginning, like, no, this shit's real, and you gotta be careful with it. So it's almost like, in a way, it's showing from the bat this family combating this Puritan colony and having to force to leave it really is a threat. Not only were they potentially an actual threat to that colony, because this movie establishes that witchcraft is real and there are dark forces and people doing weird things. But that this family now is on the out, and they're now threatened by potentially things like that going out into the woods. There's some evil out there. And then who knows what's going to do to you. So it changes up the perspective of, like, how we look at witchcraft now and understand, like, that was a lot of, like, unjust superstition and crap like that, versus, no, this movie's, like, straight up, like, it's justified. It is legit justified. Especially when they show the devil as an actual force. And this is another miss the mark. I know some people are going to disagree with me. But this is potentially another miss the mark thing, where I think I'm going to make an argument from a writing and a structural standpoint. I don't think they should have shown the witch. I don't think they should have even made witchcraft a potentially real thing in this world. And I definitely don't think they should have, like, shown the devil. I think they should have made it to where, like, this is a psychological horror where you, as the viewer, question, is potentially superstitious things, is potentially magic and dark arts and the devil. Are these potentially real things or not? You don't know, and you're watching the entire time to determine whether they are. I would argue that that's possibly what the direction of this movie should have gone in. Just saying, because then the movie could have been sort of like a weird psychology study where you're seeing potentially a young woman who is sort of you're seeing potentially a young woman who, whether she thinks she's becoming a witch or not, is clearly falling apart because of the time she lives in, and that's where that superstition comes from. That's where that madness breeds, and it's sort of and they probably should end the movie with her talking to Black Phillip, and then her literally looking at this goat going like, if ye be the devil, or if ye be Satan, please beseech and talk to me. And then it would have like eerily zoomed in on the goat and zoomed in on her and then zoomed back on the goat and then cut to black and said the end, to let the viewer sort of give like that ambiguity of for the viewer to go, was witchcraft real or not? There were some weird things that you saw that were shot, but what if it was all in her head and she was actually just doing and plaguing her family the whole time because, she was resentment towards her parents. She was actually insane the whole time. She thought she was a witch, and or maybe there could have been something that sort of indicated she wanted to be a witch, or maybe she thought she was and was just slowly falling apart. And then it could have been like a psychology piece, just a very well immersed, historically founded psychology piece about those items, about those supernatural elements. I do think that the movie would have done better that way. However, the movie, I think the writers and everybody putting it together, I think they said, you know what, what if there were actual witches during that time and they could do some really dark shit, and that was the reason that these people were like that, and the movie went in that direction, instead of my more like film-oriented psychology piece about somebody potentially going mad because of things in the time that they lived in. They went in the supernatural direction, and the movie goes like, oh no, straight up, witches will steal your fucking baby and like drink their blood and make love with the devil and get weird powers. And I will say that the movie is horrifying and does horrifying, disturbing things like that really well. I mean, it shows their oldest son, goes out into the woods, he gets lost. He finds their dog Fowler with like a stomach torn open, which is really sad, by the way. I don't like seeing animals dead in a movie. I just don't. I'm sorry. That bothers me. Dogs, cats, horses, doesn't matter. It makes me go, oh, wow, like that. It's like watching a video where you see somebody like, hurting an animal. That's not fun. That's not, but it's like horrifying. But I get it. So it fits that part of the genre. But what I'm trying to get at is, the young son goes out, finds the witch, and then their family is like having this argument about like this thing that the father didn't tell the mother that he sold their cup because they were desperate for money to get resources for food, because they weren't going to really be able to survive out there, and they're lying to each other and keeping secrets, which is adding to the family dysfunction. And it's even worse because lying is a sin, so you definitely should never be a sinner in this world. And then the teenage daughter goes out. She sees her brother. He's naked. He's like hyperventilating on the pole, and she's like, oh my god. They bring them in, and then the next day or the day after, he like starts falling apart because what looks like he's possessed by the devil. And then it's like he's saying that the witch is trying to get inside his head and fuck with his soul. And then the family's watching and helpless and falling apart, and then the twins are being weird and they start chanting things, and then they mention that it's the teenage daughter who's actually doing it because she was toying with one of the twins and making a joke of like, yes, I am a witch, and things like that. And so the family starts falling apart. The mom is like, what is actually going on? And the parents are watching their son convulse and writhe from what looks like it could be, he's trying to like self-exorcise this dark thing trying to take over his soul or his mind. And then he laments that he sees Jesus, he sees the light, and he's going to be saved. And then he dies, and it's like this ultimately tragic moment. And the family immediately falls apart right then and there. And then but the problem I have is the movie is called The Witch. And you're thinking the witch probably is about that creepy old woman that you see at the beginning of the movie, who abducts an infant and who's doing dark, fucked up things. And who breaks in, and they see her like munching on their goats while like the three kids are locked up in the shed. And you think that, but then you find out that, oh no, as the movie goes along, you find out the witch was actually about the teenage daughter. Because of tragic circumstance and dark forces, turns out she becomes a witch. And apparently he's really going to be into it or some shit. That I think is actually the fatal flaw in the movie for me. Because the thing is, and I get it that it's supposed to be, again, I think if it would have been like a material, mundane, like supernatural, not even, no, I'm sorry, a mundane psychological horror with no actual supernatural elements, unless it's all in like her mind, I think that would have made a far better movie. But with her, here's my problem. So the movie ends with, so like, the family falls apart. The parents are thinking that all of their kids who are left alive may or may not be dabbling in witchcraft, and they lock him in the shed. And then the dad has this really emotional monologue outside when he's chopping wood, where he breaks down and he basically begs God for forgiveness and asks him to help because he's like, in pride, I allowed my pride to ruin my family. It's like a really emotional moment for the strong guy who's trying to be a good father and husband and caretaker for his family and take care of their farm and stuff. And he gives this lamented, like, speech, and and then the next night, the mom has a horrifying dream, and I'll get back to that in a second. But then it's like the dad steps outside. We don't know where I see. That's the thing. I thought that the twins were gone, but I thought I saw her potentially holding their clothes. The teenage daughter wakes up, so the twins are gone, presumed in this movie, presumed dead. The dad comes outside and sees that like the sheds burst open, and then Black Phillip the goat comes out of nowhere. And Black Phillip is a goat that you see running around. It's implied that he's kind of potentially dangerous, but I got it more as just like they didn't want him getting out and hurting people, or they didn't want him getting out and ruining, like, running away or something like that, because they're dependent on these animals to survive. But Black Phillip comes out of nowhere and rams the dad, somehow gashes open his gut to the point where it looks like and the music plays and it's obvious that it's like a fatal wound. And he picks up the axe and he thinks he's going to go attack Black Phillip, and instead he says, like, corruption is my father's name. And then the goat kills him, and while their teenage daughter's watching, and then the daughter's horrified, and then she runs over to try and help him, and then the mom comes out and she's like, what did you do? It was you all along. And then of course it's just tragic. It's well put together tragedy. Good tragedy is circumstantial. You happen to be the person at the wrong time. They happen to catch you coming out of the building at the wrong time. You happen to time it properly, or rather improperly. That's good tragedy in my opinion. Forced tragedy is bullshit. Circumstantial tragedy is where it's at. It's fluid, it's natural, it's worked, and it adds to the upending, the feeling you're supposed to have whenever tragedy hits. So in this case, she pops out and she's like, oh my God, no. And the mom comes out and she goes, daughter, you are the witch. You were the reason that you probably took Samuel out into the wood and did something with him. And she's like, no, I didn't. And she's like, you just killed my husband. You probably killed the twins. You're the one who probably put some kind of a hex on our son. It's you all along. And then the mother starts to like lose it. And then the daughter is like, no, mom, no, it's not true. And then they kind of end up in like a natural, like the mother's trying to kill her daughter now out of natural kind of revenge. And then the daughter ends up like having to knife her to defend herself, and then she looks around and realizes that like and then there's like this raw, bitter, tormented moment where the daughter is like, I just had to kill my mom to defend myself. I just saw my dad murdered by this goat. And obviously something's going on. The twins are gone, or dead again, depending on how well I couldn't see them in that shot. Which if they were, okay, fine, they're dead. The baby died at the very beginning. Their oldest son was cursed or tormented to death. So she's sitting there going like, there's this moment where she's like, she's kind of collapsing and going like, she is having this realization that my family's gone and I'm all that's left. And then it goes to the next final, ending arc scene where Black Phillip and her go into the shed, and go into like where do they go? They go into the house or the guest house or the shed or something like that, the barn. And then she starts talking to Black Phillip, and this is where I don't know if it's where the breakdown here is. Hold on. Okay. She starts talking to Black Phillip, and she's like, Black Phillip, if you are the devil, or if you are some devil, or if you are some demonic power, I beseech you to talk to me. And then she's talking to the goat, and then she's about to turn away before the goat. You hear this whisper, and it's eerie, and this whisper goes like, what do you want? and it's like obviously tempting her. And here's the thing, so like the goat says, "What do you want?" And she's like, "I want," and she just immediately turns and says like, "I want devilish power," or something like that, or I want powers be. And he's like, "Do you want butter? Do you want?" Or he's like, he says like, "Do you want fresh butter? Do you want to see the world?" And then she just starts getting even more excited, like, "Yes, yes." And then it cuts back and you see like, you'll never see the guy fully, but you see like this dark guy with boots and spurs, and he's like, walk, walk, walk. And then he walks around her, he puts his hand on her shoulders. Again, you don't get to see him the way the camera's cut off. But he's like, sign your name in my book. And she's like, I don't know how to write my name. And then he's like, "I'll guide your hand then." And then, so literally the devil comes out. The devil pops out. That turns out Black Phillip, in fact, was either Black Phillip is just a goat, or the devil possessed the goat or took the form of a he goat. And then he comes over and is like, "Hey, do you want to be a witch?" And she's like, "Yes, yes, I do." And I'm just sitting there going like, "What the fuck?" And then so then she walks naked out into the woods, and there's this eerie music, and then you hear this chanting, and it's all these women, and they're on this mound of this. They're in a circle around this fire, and the girl and Black Phillip like go to the beginning of this mound, or they go at the bottom of the mound. They're staring up at these witches, and it's obvious that they're worshiping and doing something with the fire. Some of them have sticks, and then it's eerie, and you're wondering like, what the hell's happening here? What's going to happen? What's going to go on? And then finally, the ending is these women, some of which are noticeably old, some of which are noticeably young, start literally flying up into the air. They're like floating and flying up into the air, and some of them which have these sticks. It's almost like they're flying on a broom. And then the girl notices that she's flying too. She's flying and slowly hovering into the air too. And then she finally just kind of gives in, and the last shot is her like floating in the air, just like kind of giving in to being a witch and having a good time with it. And then it cuts, and it says the end, and it says like this story was based off a variety of historical accounts and cases of witchcraft during this, the colony periods, and the puritanical period and stuff like that, of the founding of Americas and in North America. And then it starts rolling credits, and I'm sitting there going like, okay, okay, something about this bothers me. And it took me a few days to kind of put things together, because first off, I had to get over just like the horrifying scenes and the imagery. Everything from the idea of like, it opens up with like an infant getting abducted and sacrificed, to weird random shots, to creepy dreams. Oh my God, like I think probably the best, most I don't know why, for me, the most unsettling part of the movie is, while all three kids, I want to say, are locked up in the shed, the mom has this dream while her husband is sleeping. The mom has this dream, and like or like she's sleepwalking or something like that. But she gets up and she walks out, and there's like the room is like dimly lit by the fire, and she sees both of her dead sons. The oldest one's in a rocking chair, holding the infant, the young one, Samuel. And she sees both of them, and then she breaks down and she goes, "Oh my God, you're here, you're back, you're alive. You were gone this whole time. Thank God you're back." And of course, the oldest son is he's not talking to her, he's whispering to her. So again, this is foreboding, this is foreshadowing that possibly these dark things don't talk to you, they whisper to you. So he starts whispering to her mother, like, "Yes, Mom, I'm back." And then she, and like he hands her the baby, and she's like in the chair, and she's, like rocking when she's got Samuel the baby. And then you hear her oldest son talking to her, and he says, and then, mind you, this is while some dark shit is going out in the shed, where like you see the witch come in, she breaks into the cabin magically, she's eating the goats, and then the twins and the oldest daughter are like freaking out because there's this creepy naked old woman. She's obviously a witch. She's like eating the animals in front of her, and it's supposed to be horrifying, and it's like, ugh. But then it cuts back to the mom, and the mom is like the mom, and she's talking to her two kids, and they're not her kids. And then you hear the oldest one, you hear her son say to her, "Hey mother, I have this book that I want you to read. Will you read it with me?" And then she's like, "In a minute, dear. Samuel's hungry." And so she takes her breast out, and she takes the infant, and she starts nursing her baby son. And then after the shit in the shed happens again, or shows you the stuff in the shed, it cuts back, and all you see is the mom is in a rocking chair, and she's like, she's weeping, and all you see is she's holding like this velvety red cape or towel or some kind of linen or some kind of a fabric. She's holding like this vibrant blood red linen, and of course you're thinking like, well, she's supposed to be nursing the baby, and then you realize on the arm of the rocking chair is this big black bird, like this raven, and it's pecking at her breasts, and you see blood coming down, and she's like rocking. That's just the imagery is fucking horror. Like it's unsettling. It's like, you know, that this mom is getting screwed over psychologically by these dark forces just in the few seconds of that shot. This old woman rocking in a chair. She's not holding the baby she thinks she's nursing. She's holding like this red linen, this red felt fabric, and there's a big raven pecking at her breast and her nipple, and it's bleeding, and she's just crying all the old time because she thinks her kids are alive and back. But you know she's like being manipulated, almost like it's a dream. And it shows this scene, like this shot is only a few seconds long, and then it cuts to black, and it's the next morning. And I was just like, oh God, what the fuck? Oh God. Like, and for some reason that scene, that shot is the best, most unsettling, in my opinion, shot in the movie. I mean, yes, an infant being caressed by an old woman's hand and then having a knife brought to him and then cutting away to realize this infant just got sacrificed is also really disturbing, but it's disturbing on a different level. That's disturbing on just like a much more natural level, whereas the mom with this raven pecking at her boob and she thinks she's nursing her dead lost infant son, like that's disturbing on like a psychological, like on a much more unnatural level. Like that is in and of itself unnatural. And that shot kept me up for a while. Like that shot kept me up when I was trying to go to bed. I was like, oh my God. And then, you know, now I'll say this. A good horror movie leaves you thinking about it and horrifies you even after the movie's done, even after the credits are rolled. I remember, like, I think it was AFI or one of those movies. One of them is either Movie Channel. Oh, I think that's what it was. I want to say it was like VH1, maybe Spike TV or something like that, where they had like the 100. This was years ago for Halloween. They had the 100 most scary films of all time, and it was like a 5-hour series, the 100 best horror movies of all time, and number one was Jaws, and I think, and the reason now part of me kind of disagrees with that. Like Jaws is unsettling if like I guess you're in the ocean and you know there's sharks nearby, but some people, the way that they were interviewing people when they were talking about it, they said Jaws number one. They said, oh my God, Jaws, that movie, I watched this movie and I left there thinking like, that's how I'm going to die. I'm going to get eaten by a shark. And they cut to another guy and a girl and they were like, I was afraid to go in the pool like the next day. Like, holy crap, you know, things like that. So a good horror movie is supposed to unsettle you in some way, shape, or form. So I'll say this about The Witch. Even though I don't really like it, and it does have some strong shots, as a horror movie, I do think it crosses the line with certain things, like, you know, sacrificing an infant and killing kids. But it does have disturbing imagery. It does have things that make me go like, oh God, that's horrifying. Oh God, what's happening to this family? Like, they're falling apart, they're dying. Like, the devil's fucking with them. Seriously. That is disturbing. It's horrifying. So I will say that. There's things about the beach, that are well shot, well written. But I don't like the fact that it's actually about the daughter. And for some reason, I want to say for some reason, to me, it didn't make any sense that the ending was this young woman has this cathartic evolution and she becomes a witch and now she's great for it. I think for me, and that's what I was thinking about for a while, was like something about this movie is bothering me, but I can't put my finger on it. And now I put my finger on it. I never really believed, and I think there's no reward yielded here in this young woman becoming a witch. There's something, and what I realized was when this young woman realized that her family was now dead, and she's talking to Black Phillip, and the voice starts talking to her. I was expecting her to realize, like, at that moment, like, I was expecting her to realize, like, oh crap, you might be actually the devil, and then she reaches for the knife and then slits back Black Phillip's throat, whether she kills the actual devil or not. I thought it was supposed to be a thing where she was going to want to get revenge for her family. Or she had some attachment to them, didn't she? She was horrified when this infant was taken from her, when Samuel was taken literally right in front of her, and all she did was like close her eyes for a few seconds and then open them, and he was gone. And then when she saw like this old woman eating away at the goat, and the twins were gone, presumed dead, and she saw, and before then she saw like the oldest son going through like this exorcist moment, and then die in front of her, and then her parent, and then on top of everything, I was sitting there thinking like that's the problem. I would think that this young girl, or this young woman, I say young woman because, I mean, even though she's like a teenager, she's a young woman. I would think because of what it was obviously she felt something for her family. She was going to demand, like I was thinking like she could have, when she was talking to the devil, she was going to demand like, I want my family back. Like very intently. Like you murdered Samuel, you murdered the twins, you murdered my brother, you murdered my father, and you made me kill my mother. So you murdered her too, basically. I want them back now. And then she would have like pulled a knife out and like stabbed Black Phillip with it or something like that. Or, something. There was no justice. There was no justice. There was no natural justice or even supernatural justice. And I didn't really believe that this young woman actually wanted to become a witch. When she said early on, she had that monologue where she was like, forgive me. It was like she was doing something rote, like short, like she was talking, she was doing like the daily prayers, like forgive me, God, for not being perfect and for trying to strive, please allow me to strive towards you, or whatever. That she has this opening prayer thing that she says, and you can tell it's like a daily thing for her. And you can tell, I mean, yeah, she kind of was going through it, but it didn't feel like she wasn't resentful of it. She wasn't hostile towards it. She was saying it because she knew she needed to say it. It was like, but it was also like routine. It wasn't that she didn't care, it was just routine. But then like the way that, like again, the infant got abducted and she was legit like freaked out. She felt bad. When she saw her brother die, you can tell she was horrified. And then when she was teasing the twins, especially the daughter, and saying like, actually, I'm the witch who did it. That to me felt like it was sibling, right? That was just siblings fucking with each other. Brothers and sisters do that. Sometimes, like when you're young and immature, you go for the throat sometimes. You say really messed up things sometimes. You say things you regret later. That's what kids do. That's what teenagers, that's what young people do when you are immature and you say mean-spirited or messed up things. Especially when you're accused or if people are throwing shit at you, you throw shit back, or you even whatever. So I never actually, that's my problem. So by the end of this movie, I don't believe that this young woman wanted to actually become a witch and that she would have just said, yes, let's do it. I thought if she was going to say yes, she would have done it crying and felt helpless. She would have said something like, I don't have a choice, do I? And started breaking down and then said, all right, fine, you piece of shit, you win. I'll be your witch, or something like that. But no, it was straight up. She just was like, you're the devil? Can I have witchcraft? And I was like, fuck that. Fuck that. Gin time, god damn it. I needed a good gulp of that shit. Fuck that shit. It bothers me. Yes, the movie unsettled me because it showed an infant being sacrificed. Yes, it upset me to see like this family slowly being picked apart by madness and superstition, but also obviously dark shit as the movie went along. And then literally the devil and his minions and his dark forces. And, which also begs the question, where's the big G-Man in all this? Where's the big Yeezy? Where's Jeezy? Is Jeezy going to help this family out or not? I guess they weren't good enough for him? What the fuck? There's no justice here. And the young woman becoming a witch, having an ending that looked like she was she was betrothed to it now? What the fuck? Where did that come from? And here's the problem. I don't know who to blame here. I don't want to blame the actress because I think she actually did a good job. But I guess but then again, if I had gotten the idea from her that she was really resentful of her family and that this is actually something that she was fine with all along, it was sort of like an understandably built up tragic end for her to be, she gave into this darkness, but she was going to give into it from the beginning. That's fine, and I should have gotten that from her, and she didn't give it to me very well. And if she's literally the character who's technically going to be driving the story from start to finish in that regard, then she should have done a better job. However, I don't know if it is her fault or not, because if the writing gives her all this stuff, but then it gives her this ending and how it ends with her, this final arc of this is where her character goes after all of these terrible things, like she's giving into the darkness. I don't know if the director, again, I don't know if it's a writing problem or if it was the director. The director was probably so much more focused on all these technical aspects. I mean, like I'll say this, I listened to the director's commentary for the Lighthouse, and Robert Eggers was talking more about technical stuff. He wasn't really talking about the story that his brother wrote. He wasn't really talking so much about the themes. He gave us a little bit of insight into the background and how the movie was sort of came, but he was talking a lot more about technical shit. And I was sitting there thinking, like, maybe that's Robert Eggers' strength, but for a movie, in order for a movie to be good, and I mean great, the technical stuff, the story, the performance, all of it's got to work. And I think that's the problem for The Witch. The story didn't work for me. Yes, it had a very dark beginning. It was like, oh my God, they're breaking rules. You don't kill the kids in a horror movie. But if it's going to do that, okay, well then what else is it going to go? Okay, where is it going to go? It's a fair question to want to know as a viewer. And I guess where The Witch went made me go, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I turned it off, and I immediately just wanted to get out. I just wanted to go. Like, I wanted to get the hell out of here. I didn't want to watch that. Like, I was sitting there going, like, when I ask myself, and maybe this is like an unnecessary, regretful kind of thought, but it's when you watch a movie and you go, why the fuck did I watch that? That's where you realize there's something going on there. So the movie rubbed me the wrong way. I mentioned the strong points of it, like the dialogue is very well researched. It's very period centric. You feel like these are the people alive at that time saying and doing these things. The referencing, how they felt, how they thought. The mother crying because their infant son, she was like, we should have taken him to be baptized. And then the father's like, no, stop, relax, it's fine. He's not in hell. And she's like, he's in hell. And she's crying. And he's like, he's not in hell, woman, stop. And you can tell like this there's a psychology to the culture and with the belief system. And like that, those parts are great. Those parts are great. There's a lot of great parts of the movie. The fundamental flaw is that it just, first off, it's way too dark. Oh, and also the soundtrack. Now the soundtrack is okay. I don't care. This is the kind of thing I'll say, and my friends I know would make fun of me for it, but I don't care. I still stand by it. I think it's an objective issue. The soundtrack is way too over the top, spooky and like nervous and unsettling and horrifying. Like the soundtrack to me didn't even need to be there. The movie could have just shown you these things and relied off the scenery, and you didn't even need a soundtrack for most of it. You didn't need a musical score for most of it. The shots are already unnerving enough as it is. The ending is unnerving. The middle and the conflict and watching this family slowly die, even the shots in the barn, the shots in the house, the movie didn't really need the soundtrack, and the soundtrack made it 100 times worse. Or it made it bad. The soundtrack made me go, this is way too, oh Jesus Christ, hurry it up. This is fucking horrible. Get out of it. Like, hurry it up. I don't want to keep watching this. The music, and that's the problem. The scenery, the conflict, the music, everything that's hitting you is just, oh my Jesus Christ, stop. And then when the time the movie's over and it's like Fiend, or whatever, I'm just like, okay, I'm done. I can go now. I'm done. I need to go outside. I need to go take a shower. I need to relax. Like, holy fuck, I feel bad. And I said before that I'm not into horror, but I'm not scared by horror movies when there's like a slasher. You know what I mean? Like when there's Jason Voorhees who's like trying to knife down the door or beat the door down and knife you. Like, that's a dude. Horrifying, like horror movies that involve like a normal person or even like a slasher, even like Freddy Krueger supernatural slasher shit, I'm not actually scared by that. Like, yeah, it's creepy, but it doesn't scare me. It doesn't make me lie awake at night. It doesn't make me like make sure all the lights in the house are turned off. But supernatural shit does. Ghosts and especially demons, for some reason those things really fuck with my head. They make me kind of like question, like, what if these things are real, and what if they come for me, and do I have the strength to fight them off? Like, there is something about that attack that does upset my gut. Even though I know I don't think demons are real, and I think ghosts are sort of like a leftover energy phenomenon. And if demons are real, then it's probably just like concentrated negative energy in somebody that flips on and they just don't know how to flip it off. I don't know, but I don't believe in the old world like God as the old man with a beard in the sky telling you what you should and should not do. I don't believe demons are these red things that crawl between the cracks in reality to get at your mind. The ghosts are not some horrifying, tormented bride or groom that's just waiting to torment and throw things around the room and scare you. I don't think that's what that shit actually is. But when I see a movie, especially if they're done well, it can mess with me. It messes with me. Like my friends will make fun of me, like, yeah, you pussied out when we watched The Conjuring, and I'm like, yeah, because it fucked with me. Like, I'm sorry. I mean, that's not the best horror movie, but there's things like that do mess with me. So The Witch, it's weird because The Witch, it doesn't play with it like demons are invisible and are somehow in you. It plays it with like, no, they inhabit things and fuck with you, and the actual devil will come out. So in that sense, it's a little different. But the Vavitch bothers me just in that general sense. And but even if, let's just say they weren't there, let's say you took my original criticism and said I think the story should have done this instead, or you took the movie as it is now, I think that regardless it still would have been bothersome. But the Vavitch is in that realm of like, okay, it's about dark forces, it's about the devil and demonic entities. Okay, well that does kind of alarm me, that does kind of scare me. But then it just, the direction that it goes in, and showing like the depravity and how far they'll go, and like I said, the fact that they're at the beginning of the movie willing to show something just so wrong and heinous, and then keep going. It's, again, I walk away going like, I know that some movies want to push boundaries, some movies want to be original, some movies want to be like, okay, what hasn't been done or shown or seen, let's go ahead and do it. People might flip out over it, but let's do it. Something like, I get it that movies want to do that, but this movie really just made me go, from start to finish, made me go, I don't want to watch this. And so some of you might be asking, did you feel though that it was a good movie going experience? Technically, because I knew it was a horror movie, yes, but I would have liked a better ending, or I would have liked to have gone in a different direction. But I'll get to what I mentioned, when I get to the Lighthouse in a minute here. I will say that it's interesting. Robert Eggers seems to like movies or stories that involve isolation and people falling apart, and the human drama that comes from either what's led by the mind, what's corrupted by the soul, what sometimes even our gonads drive us to do. Like, there's little things in this movie that I thought were very visceral, like, this family is like in the Vavitch. This family is out, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. They don't have contact with hardly anybody. It's implied that there are families that they do deal with, but it's implied that they don't deal with them unless they have to, or maybe they're not allowed to, kind of thing. But there's little things in there where, like, the oldest daughter is like near the creek, and then their son, who's a little bit younger than she is, and you can tell this young man's like he's like going through puberty. He like occasionally will look at her like slightly exposed bosom, and then she'll look at him and he'll be like, oh no, like I wasn't looking at that, kind of thing. So there's little bits of things like even sexual tension in this movie. Like, and of course the movie's not wholeheartedly about that. The Lighthouse has a bit more of that in there, but the Vavitch is like, it'll play around with things like that. Sexual tension even is there. So like the things that our genitals will drive us, our hearts will drive us, our souls, our minds will drive us, our fears or insecurities or demands or our ambitions will drive us, or our desires will drive us, whatever. But it's interesting. Robert Eggers seems to like focusing on, when you go out in the middle of nowhere, it seems like you just start to break down, and here's potentially why. Now, Robert Eggers also seems to like different time periods and dialogue and stuff like that. Great, good for him. Whatever. If that's his style, that's his thing. I'll say this, not a lot of filmmakers are authentically looking to go, no, I want to know what this family would have spoke like and lived and sounded like if we magically time traveled to that place. I wanted to know what these people really felt like. And I'll say that I have to give people credit that were willing to put that together. Now, I don't want to keep rambling and repeating stuff, so I'll just say in summary, I did not like the Vavitch, but then again, I knew I wasn't going to be huge into it, because again, I'm not a huge horror guy. Gothic stories, it depends, of course, but raw horror where you need to be unsettled start to finish or something like that, I don't get much out of that. I've said before. I do think this movie, I would recommend this movie to die-hard horror fans. If you like Gothic movies, I would recommend it. But I wouldn't recommend it as a casual viewing, because again, it's a disturbing movie from start to finish. The stuff they show or even imply or indirectly show, again, it's kind of haunting. So I would not recommend the Vavitch to the average person or the average moviegoer. I just wouldn't. And as a historian, I want to recommend the movie because it looks like it's trying to be a historically accurate movie, but because of the validating and very obvious supernatural elements at play and the thing and how it justifies that at the end and how it shows that, and then it makes me kind of go, well, technically it's not that historically accurate because we know people can't do that shit. We know that wasn't shit people were able to do even in ancient times. So because it goes into that realm of it's obviously supernatural, I wouldn't recommend it as a period piece. Which that part actually is the most tragic to me because I like period pieces, especially when they're done well. Like this movie almost had it, but then it showed the evil, spooky shit, and then Black Phillip actually turned into the devil, and there's actual witchcraft and women flying through the air and mad and cackling at the moon. It's not really a period piece. It's not realistic. So in that sense, I technically can't recommend it. But if you wanted to see it for that, I would say, you know what, most of it is shown well. It's like really only 10% of it that's like, okay, well, that's obvious bullshit. The other 90% where it's just the family and the dialogue and how they dressed and how they ate and how they did prayers and things like that, whatever, then yes, that part of it I would. But the supernatural shit obviously means that it's not that authentic. But doesn't mean that's not what people thought back then. Because they probably thought some women did that kind of stuff. They probably thought this is how woods witches will get your children in the night. It's like, well, there were some people that probably are worried about that shit. So maybe it is a good period piece. I don't know. I'm conflicted about it. So I don't recommend the Vavitch to most people, but unless you're really looking for a horrifying movie, here you go. Otherwise, that's it. I would give the movie, I don't know, I give it 9 out of 13 witch cauldrons. There, I give it 9 out of 13 witch cauldrons. Which technically means it's not bad. I don't ever want to watch it again. Ever. I don't want to watch this movie. And if somebody has this on in their living room, I'm going to be like, hey, that's cool. I'm going to wait outside. I don't want to watch this movie again. It kind of messed with me. And also, again, rest in peace. My grandmother died the same night that I watched this movie. So it brings back kind of weird moments. Anyway, so that's the Vavitch. I've said all I need to say about it. I think now I'm going to go on to the Lighthouse. This video looks like it's going to be a little bit longer than I wanted to, so my apologies. I'll try not to ramble and repeat myself. I kind of feel like I did that the last time I made a video about a video game that I made or that I played. And anyway, I'll get to poignant matters. First off, gin time. I got to get that gin down in me. All right, so now let's talk about the Lighthouse. A much more uplifting movie. Kinda not. I'm being facetious. So The Lighthouse is technically not a horror movie, but if you categorized it as a horror movie, I wouldn't combat it that well. I mean, I wouldn't combat it that hard. I would say The Lighthouse is much more of like a artistic. I would say it's more of like an artistic thriller. It goes into some psychological elements. It does have some horrifying and gothic moments. And there's times where it's direct, and there's times where it's very interpretive, like almost Lynchian. In fact, as the movie goes along, it gets much more Lynchian than when it starts. So this is another period drama. This is technically set in, I believe it says here, the 1890s. I was going to say the late 1800s. I was right. It's a different movie, and it's honestly, it's similar speed, but it's a movie that I appreciate way more. For a variety of reasons. But The Lighthouse is about, it's set in the late 1800s. It's supposed to be like New England, Lighthouse. It's America in the late 1890s. And it's about a couple dudes, a senior lighthouse keeper played by Willem Dafoe and a junior lighthouse keeper played by Robert Pattinson. So it's nice to know that Robert Eggers is starting to get a little bit more star power in terms of his place in Hollywood. Because before then, the people that he didn't have any famous people, at least as far as I could tell. I think he had like very specific HBO level actors that, kind of thing, like they're really good. All the actors in the Vavitch are really good. Again, potentially except the oldest daughter, who's the main character technically. But again, that's kind of argumentative. It depends on what lens you're looking through that. Willem Dafoe, very well-known established actor. He goes full throttle in this movie. Willem Dafoe goes full throttle. He is an awesome character actor in this movie, and Robert Pattinson. It's funny. My friend characterized him as a character actor, where maybe I never thought that R. Pats was a character actor. I always thought Dafoe was a little bit more like, possibly a bit more, and in this movie, but regardless of appreciation, um, Willem Dafoe gives like 110% in this movie, and I love him. He plays like this guy who you find out is an old sea captain who became a lighthouse keeper, and he like embodies that time period and the dialogue and the nautical terms and the aquatic terminology and the sailor speak, and the seamanship. I'm not going to make any semen-based jokes, by the way, because this movie's actually got 2 different scenes where grown men are jerking off on their own, and so I'm just not going to do it. That movie's got some gross elements, in my opinion. Anyway, but Willem Dafoe, he embodies this character. His name is Thomas Wake, and then Robert Pattinson plays this character named Ephraim Winslow, who is a young man. You can tell he's like learning the ropes of being a lighthouse keeper, and he's the junior lighthouse keeper. Willem Dafoe is obviously the senior guy, and the movie it's an interesting story because it's about these 2 dudes on this lighthouse by themselves. They have like a 4-week contract, and they both start doubting each other. They both start causing problems for each other. It's obvious that R. Pats is our main protagonist and Willem Dafoe is potentially our antagonist, but also our mentor. What's interesting is that, so you know that they're both coming onto the lighthouse, and there's something eerie about their disposition, both of them. And you know early on, R. Pats, he definitely has got there's something going on with this guy. But he sees Willem Dafoe and figures out that there's something going on with this guy. So it's interesting. The movie plays off of duality. It plays off of, isolation themes about these 2 dudes, and they're all on their own. But the movie has all these subtle little elements that play into it, and some of which I didn't catch the first time, and it made me want to rewatch it, and I kept rewatching it various times, and I noticed little things, different things along the way, and then I formed opinions of like, oh, that's what's going on, and then I rewatched it, and I went, no, I misinterpreted that, like, this is actually, no, okay, so that's a totally separate thing. Anyway, this movie is a fascinating movie. I love it. I've been rewatching it a lot. Everything from the period-centric dialogue, the aquatic and nautical terminology, and the way they talk to each other. The fact that, you know how like a lot of people felt like Captain, like when Johnny Depp played Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, he was kind of playing him like he wasn't an authentic pirate, but he was this free-spirited, almost rock star, swashbuckling hippie kind of guy who drinks a lot of rum and stabs dudes. But there's something mysterious about him. But like, and then opposite to him, you had like Jeffrey Rush, who really brought out like that old school "arr" pirate. You know, there's that stereotypical like "arr" pirate, and Jeffrey Rush technically combined with Johnny Depp, but more Rush, I would argue, really brought back that classic and revitalized like that pirate character, that pirate archetype, if you will. Willem Dafoe basically almost does the same like thing with a sea captain. And like, what's even funny is that as it goes along near the end of the movie, these 2 characters are getting into an argument, and Robert Pattinson's character says something like, "You think you're so high and mighty, you know, because you're a goddamn lighthouse keeper?" And then he's like, "I'm tired of your Captain Ahab bullshit. You know, you were never a sea captain, you never was, or whatever." And I was like, but like the fact that he made a joke about Willem Dafoe's character. And it's like, and I don't think something tells me that was in the script, but even if that wasn't in the script, I would have believed that after having made this movie and they got to that scene, Robert Pattinson probably was like, if I don't like this guy, I'm going to go after how he operates, because he operates almost like a stereotype. He's like a cartoon character. Willem Dafoe is playing the archetypal seaworthy sailor man, you know, and he's like using all kinds of terminology and stuff like that. So his vocabulary is great, and the way he latches onto it and he portrays it. And then now I'll say one thing. When I watched this, when my friends showed me this movie the first time, they turned on the subtitles. And when they saw it in theaters, they didn't have the subtitles on. You know, movies don't default subtitles unless it's like, you know, specifically for like a viewing for the hearing impaired or something like that. But the fact that I'll say this, the fact that I watched it and that they had the dialogue on and I could read exactly what was being said by these two characters, I honestly feel like was the smart move because that made me appreciate it way more. I have a feeling that if I saw The Lighthouse in theaters and I would have to try and remember like half of the dialogue that was grumbled or mumbled or spoken off to the side, like I don't know if I would have had the same appreciation for it. But the fact that I could, when these characters talk, especially when Willem Dafoe delivers his lines, and sometimes he kind of garbles them and mumbles them, not as bad as like Eddie Redmayne in any of his performances. Side note, this American Harry Potter bullshit's got to go. I'm tired of Eddie Redmayne's characters, and his acting sucks. And these new, like, the Fantastic Beast movies, I fucking hate them. I'm going to make a separate movie about that, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to make a separate video about that in the future, because I hate them. The old school Harry Potter movies were perfectly fine. I'm not going off on that tangent right now. But anyway, what was I saying? So, it's these two characters are battling each other. It's a story about them dealing with each other in the lighthouse, learning about each other. But the thing is, you uncover things about Robert Pattinson's character along the way, and you also start to get an idea of Willem Dafoe's character. But what's interesting is that it's a mirror kind of situation here. So again, spoiler warnings, but I already said that at the beginning. So first off, so these two, Robert Pattinson's clearly having a hard time getting adjusted to all of the hard work. And he, being a lighthouse keeper, because apparently doing all this stuff on the island on your own for 4 weeks, apparently it's pretty hard labor. And I'm the kind of guy where I haven't done a whole lot of hard labor in my life. Like, I don't do manual labor. I've never had a job that was like super physically demanding. Not really. So anytime that I think about guys or gals that have jobs like farmers or deckhands, any kind of job that would really, like construction, oh my God, especially here in San Antonio, especially when the heat, like I admire anybody that works outside and does that kind of like heavy lifting. So here in this movie, I'm watching this movie of like, so these two lighthouse keepers, it's obvious that Robert Pattinson's having a hard time, but he's trying to be friends with this old guy, and he knows that it's one of those things where there's implications that like, the old guy's trying to teach him a thing or two, but then they start to kind of respect each other and have a good time. But then there's these little mysterious things that bug Ephraim Winslow. And, from the very beginning, he says something like, so when am I going to get to tend the lighthouse? Or like, when am I actually going to get to tend the light? And then Willem Dafoe is the entire time like, you're not. That's my job. You're not ready to tend the light. Even though it's supposed to not be a big thing, And in fact, at the beginning, he even says, Ephraim Winslow says, like, well, I read in the manual that we're supposed to be alternating shifts. And Willem Dafoe's like, yeah, well, I'm in charge. I tend the light. You don't. That's simple as that. So there's this there's this immediate Zeus and Prometheus theme. There's already this Greek hearkening theme of like the young man wants to get to the light of not his father in this case, but like his father, like a superior figure. And they're both men, so it's in the realm of like masculinity and aggression and warfare and battling of the minds and stuff like that. So there's already early on this thing of like he wants to get to the light, but he can't. The other guy's like, no, I'm in charge of the light. Don't you even think about it. So again, Prometheus, Zeus stuff. In addition to harkening back to other characters and other names, and of course like Poseidon and Triton and other terms that gets thrown in there. And then as it goes along, Robert Pattinson is plagued by two things. Psychologically, not physically. I mean, physically, working as a lighthouse keeper and all the stuff he's got to do and get used to is demanding. But he's plagued by two things. For one, it's hinted as it went along that there's this dead guy in his life that he needs to deal with. And there's also the second thing is there's this mermaid. He keeps fantasizing about this mermaid, and of course it's symbolic of like the distance between the distancing of like sexual needs, and if they don't get fulfilled, and we kind of go into our heads about it. We fantasize, yada yada yada. And the mermaid is a mythical creature, so it's like literally anything feminine is unrealistic in this environment, in this setting, in this theme. And it's sort of like, but these are men that we know that men and women have needs, and we know guys are horny, and if we don't get sex, then we have to jerk off, and if we don't do that, then we start to get weird. So we know those kind of things. Like psychology now is pretty straightforward. But it's sort of like interesting. Like the first thing that we encounter that's feminine is this. He finds this trinket that's been shoved into his mattress that he's going to sleep on, and it's like this mermaid. And then he starts fantasizing about this mermaid. He thinks he sees a mermaid at one point. He starts flipping out, especially after a night of heavy drinking. And then when it's obvious that they're going to be stuck there, he goes to the shed and he sort of fantasizes about this mermaid and having sex with her because that's the closest thing to female he can get, and things like that. But he's also, and I mentioned the first thing, he's plagued by a dead guy. Now you learn early on, he used to be a lumberjack. He was a lumberjack before he was a lighthouse keeper, or at least doing those jobs. And then when Willem Dafoe starts talking to him, at first. Robert Pattinson says, my name is Ephraim Winslow. And he's like, all right, fine, I'm Thomas Wade, or whatever. And then, they, over the course of working, and they get drunk a few times, they fight, they argue, and then when it's like they're stuck on when they find out that they're stuck on the island, and that they need to be rationing, but food's running low, and water's running low, and they have to start drinking a bunch of alcohol to make themselves work and distract themselves through the emptiness. Eventually, at some point, they have a really rough night, and then the next, while they're like, they have a rough night of drinking and partying, and then they get into a fight. There's some subtle homosexual tension there and that leads them to get into the fight while they're drunk as hell and they're tired and they're psychologically worn out and they want to get off the island, yada yada yada. And then there's a point where they're kind of cradling each other, and then they're drinking, just kind of drunkenly muttering. And then that's when Robert Pattinson admits, he goes, hey, my name isn't Ephraim Winslow. My name is Thomas Howard. Ephraim Winslow was like my boss. And then you find out as he goes on to confess that he didn't like his lumberjack boss was a guy named Ephraim Winslow. His name is Thomas Howard. And again, you automatically see like both of them are named Thomas, so there's like identity themes here at work. But so eventually he says like Ephraim Winslow was my boss, and then he confesses like I watched him basically drown while we were doing like a log jam or something like that. And again, I only know so much about the life and works of a lumberjack, but apparently it was dangerous. It's also physically demanding, and apparently he said he hated his boss. He kept calling him and he kept insulting him, saying he was no good, talking shit about him, and stuff like that. And then eventually he said like he watched him slip into the water, and basically he got knocked unconscious, or he got crushed, or he got killed by the logs, or he drowned, or it was a combination of all of that. And then Robert Pattinson says, I admitted I didn't like the guy and I wanted to kill him at several times, but I watched him drown and while he was calling out for help, and I didn't help him. I actively, and then you find out that there's like the guilt themes that might be driving him insane. His guilt theme is like, I didn't technically murder my boss, but I let him drown. I didn't offer any help when I knew I could have, when I knew I should have. So indirectly, I'm responsible for his death. Whether you call it murder or not, I mean, it's irrelevant at that point. You can just say flat out, okay, so technically he feels guilty because he either directly or indirectly murdered his boss, who we didn't like, and it was petty, it was really petty friction. Like the guy kept ragging on me, would go, fuck him, whatever. But then again, so like he admits that, and then things start to get weird after that. Things start to get really weird, and like his boss, chops up the lifeboat that they had that they could have used to try and row to shore if they needed it to. Even though it was implied that they're in the midst of a storm, it's probably suicide, or at least it could have worked. But then his boss comes out with an axe and chops up Willem Dafoe chops up the lifeboat, and Robert Pattinson's like, what the fuck, and like runs away. And then they get into an argument, and just their interaction, you think like, okay, Robert Pattinson may or may not be crazy, but also Willem Dafoe may or may not be crazy too. Like both of these people who happen to also be named Thomas and working alongside each other are crazy, and something is going on here. And they get into an argument, they get drugged up, they try to drink all the booze, to get through they try to get through the storm. And then like the next day, Robert Pattinson looks through the logbook, and basically he sees that his like Willem Dafoe, who the whole time has been telling him like, lad, I didn't like you at first, but you're getting better, you're doing great, and they're starting to be kind of buddy, even though there's obvious torment and friction between them. He looks at the logbook and he finds out that no, Willem Dafoe's basically been writing and saying that like he sucks at his job, he's terrible, he's psychopathic or something like that, and basically makes Robert Pattinson go like, you piece of shit, you've been lying to me the whole time. You know what? You're a liar. and a phony, and you've been building me up this whole time. What the hell's wrong with you? You know, and basically, but then like they start arguing with each other, and you find out that they're both. It's a fun little. It's almost like a tennis match, and the ball is going between each of their insecurities and their insanity, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting, and ultimately it culminates into they fight. Robert Pattinson kills Willem Dafoe's character, and manages to get. He finally, at the very end of the movie, he steals the keys. He gets to the top of the lighthouse. He starts to try and, I guess, become one with the flame in this very, very artsy, weird shot. And it's obvious that it's too powerful for it is too powerful for him. And then he like falls down all the spiral staircase of the lighthouse. It's like it's imagery of like he's gone at that point. And then the final shot of the movie is this very creepy, eerie shot that kind of harkens back to different things in the movie. Again, elements of hubris and elements of impending tragedy. The final shot of the movie is he's naked. He's lying atop the rocks while you hear the sound of the waves crashing in the background, and seagulls are like pecking on his dying body and like eating away at literally what looks like his liver, or where that liver, or like where his intestines are, and that side of his body, and seagulls are pecking away at him as he's lying there. And it's interesting because he's obviously like falling apart. He's dying, and it's like zooming out, cutting to white. And it's interesting because to me it looks like, well, not only is Robert Pattinson naked and getting his liver pecked out by seagulls, his eyes are like bloodshot and bulging out of his head, and the way it's almost looking like it's like he's struggling to breathe. And for me in my head, my interpretation was it almost looked like he was a fish who was slowly suffocating on land and getting eaten by seagulls, and which of course fits in with kind of the themes of like the water and the ocean and the things that go in and around it. Sorry, I'm itching my nose here. And that's the final shot, and then it cuts to black, and then you hear like this old timey like old recorded sea shanty playing during the credits, and that's the movie. Now there's a bunch of other things that happen too, but it harkens back to these two characters, and of course Robert Pattinson is us. He's the viewer. He's the young person learning how the ways of the lighthouse keeper, learning about superstitions. Like there's a moment where there's a seagull that's bothering him while he's trying to get some coal to like the house where the fire is for the giant foghorn, and there's a seagull that's in his way bothering him, and the seagull's like squawking at him and stuff. And then Robert Pattinson says like, get the hell out of here, and he throws a piece of coal at it. And Willem Dafoe, who's on the lighthouse, sees him, and then they're having dinner like that night, and then they're talking to each other, making jokes, and then finally Willem Dafoe, he gets serious and he goes like, I saw you messing with that gull. You best leave him alone. It's bad luck to kill a seabird. And Robert Pattinson's like, yeah, whatever. And then Willem Dafoe legit reaches over and bam, slaps Robert Pattinson. And Robert Pattinson like stands up almost in shock, the fact that we got slapped by this man. And then Willem Dafoe is like, it's bad luck to kill a seabird. So it's sort of like it immediately sets up a foreboding, really foreboding moment. And then of course later on, at some point when tensions are running a little bit, Robert Pattinson he notices there's something wrong with the water, like in the cistern, the well, and then he goes over and he sees there's a dead gull in it, and he's like, what the hell? And then like a gull, the one presumably the one that he threw the rock at earlier, threw the piece of coal at earlier, lands in front of him and starts squawking at him, and then he's like looking at him almost like, what? I didn't do this. But then the gull starts attacking him, and Robert Pattinson immediately lets this very animalistic ragey out, and he grabs a hold of the gull, and you see him and it's a shot of and of course it's not real. This part isn't the real bird. He's talking to a real bird 1 second, then he grabs, it's obviously a fake gull, but he grabs a gull, and then he starts beating it till it's like bloody and broken up against the well, and it's just, and then he lets it fall to the ground, and so he kills the seabird, and then there's this change in the music, and then literally a change in the winds, and it's coming from the northeast, and then Willem Dafoe goes the winds change, it's a nor'easter is coming for us, which are really, really bad storms, or at least in the movie, right? So and then of course you realize that okay, well something, and this is before he has that confession. where Robert Pattinson is like, so I accidentally killed my boss, or I intentionally let my boss die or drown or whatever, and then, um, but then like, and there's elements of like, okay, so he doomed him, but then there's moments where like when Robert Pattinson is like confronting Willem Dafoe, saying like, you're crazy, you've been lying to me the whole time, you're nothing more than a liar, and then Willem Dafoe is like, you're calling me whatever these things, you had me figured or whatever. But you know what? You're right. You're a dog. You're a murderer. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna? And then he says, "Are you gonna kill me like you did that gull?" And then Robert Pattinson's response is like, "I didn't, like I didn't kill the gull." And Willem Dafoe was like, "Liar! You're the one who killed the gull. You're the one that changed the winds and cursed us." And it's like we as the viewer saw him very viscerally, really murder the shit out of that gull. That really was egging him on. So then it cuts back to the idea that, maybe these are two peas in a pod. These are, and there's that reflection theme, there's that identity theme. The, Thomas Howard, young Thomas Howard and old Thomas Wake, arguably are the same person battling it out on this island. And of course, then it begs questions, the interesting kind of interpretations. Is this, a guilty conscience trying to overcome its own guilt, and it just takes the place of like these two men on an island and the lighthouse, the beacon for light, the beacon for power, but also truth, and things that will like sell. And they even say early on, Robert Pattinson asks Willem Dafoe, he says, "So what happened to your last junior man?" And then he tells him, well, he went insane. He started muttering about mermaids and curses and stuff like that, and sirens. And then he also was obsessed with the light. He said that he thought that there was salvation. He says he thought there was some kind of salvation in the light. Poor bastard. I'm sorry. He said, poor bastard went mad. Things like that. So, and then of course, when Thomas Howard finally, what does he do? He has to kill this other guy who may or may not be an extension of himself, may or not be a more real but just as mad version of himself. It could be like a father-son association. Association. I don't know. She sells seashells by the seashore. Damn it, see, right? You know what? Gin time. This is booze on brain. Drink responsibly and don't start, kids. Anyway. No, but like, so there's moments like that where Robert Pattinson finally says he has to kill to do it, but he gets to the light, and then it goes from, it looks like he's starting to laugh, but then it's starting to scream in pain, and he's going insane from it. It's like it's this powerful screech, and then he boots back, falls down the stairs in a spiral pattern. It's like again, the light sends him spiraling back down into the darkness, and then it shows him on the rocks, getting pecked at, dying, struggling to breathe, broken against the rocks, and having his come on, it's his liver getting pecked out by the gulls, people. It's this part of his body exposed with his intestines and his guts, and it's like, this is where the liver, that's what the seagull's eating. It's clearly Greek. It's clearly old school Greek myth, Greek tragedy. So there's moments like that, and it feeds into the identity. It feeds into different themes here, and then there's also, but a good movie understands little things and nuance and things to kind of throw at you, so that if you rewatch it, you can go like, oh, I didn't catch that. You know what? Wait, what if that? And then fill in the blank with something. It makes you think. The Lighthouse, the brilliance of this movie is that it makes you think. It makes you wonder, like, is this the story of, like, is it just simply two men slowly going insane when they're by themselves and there's no outlets of any, there's no women on the island, there's no sexual outlets, there's no companionship, there's no softness, there's no passion really. You just get these hairy, sweaty, hardworking men who do, in some cases, back-breaking labor, surviving, amidst, like, out against the ocean. And it's like, well, when the seas are calm, it's fine. You don't worry about it. But then when the storm's coming, you're like, oh crap! What if a tidal wave runs us over, or knocks over? What if a hurricane knocks over the building in our shelter? Things like that. It's a reminder of when you're in a very primal situation. You're reminded of just how insignificant and mortal you are, and that can make people go crazy, that can make people go insane or be desperate, and then there's other little things where what if it's also showing how, like, madness is infectious, or maybe even in some cases generational. I mean, you have an old man who's clearly, he talks about how you know, he says three different ways on why he messed his leg up. Like he says, like at first he says I messed my leg up when I was on shore with some prostitutes, and then he says I lost my leg to scurvy, and then he says I lost my leg to an accident on a ship, and so, or something like that. And so it's the thing of he changes his story, and then he realized like this young man is like, listen, old man, you're clearly insane. And he starts saying, like, that's when he blows up on him, and he's like, you're a liar, you were never a sea captain, you know, and things like that. There's all those little elements that keep coming back, and that he keeps bringing up, and it also makes you question him, though, because you know from the start there's something going on in him. You know, whenever you see a movie where people are having haunting dreams, you better believe it's going to mean something by the end of it, right? So you find out that, well, like the body he sees in the water is like the body that he sees in the water is like his old boss, and then when Willem Dafoe, you know, gets into a fight, when Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe get into like their final fight, if you will, there's a point where, you know, Pattinson knocks him on the ground, and he punches him and punches him and punches him, and then finally he looks at him and he sees his boss, he sees the guy, and so like it's his guilt, the guy who is the embodiment of his guilt from the start makes him stop and then starts throwing punches, and then he, you know, kind of gets like his night's locked, he gets the lights knocked out a little bit, and he looks back down, and then it's the mermaid who's like, you know, caressing him, and then it's like he's immediately reminded of like, you know, as a man he needs that fulfillment, and then he starts to lose himself, and you know he leans down to make out with her, but then he rears back up, and you see Willem Dafoe is literally this coral and barnacle and this, you know, reefed sea god guy who's maniacally laughing at him and taunting him like, oh, you thought I was something else, didn't you? So it plays out the idea of like, you know, passion and the madness of the waters and things of that nature, the darkness of the sea, and when you look down and saying there's something unsettling in that to us as you know, land-based mammals. Like the sea is fascinating, but it's like it's also in a way it's something about that darkness is unsettling and horrifying, you know, to us. So there's elements like that get thrown in. And then there's a bunch of other little things I noticed rewatching it too, like just little indicators that you could, again, it's a very artistic film, and you can interpret it in a lot of different ways, however you wanted to. One thing I noticed early on, so like, you know, the opening scene is they're on a boat, they land at the island. Well, here's the thing, you know, like they're walking up once they land, once they dock, they're walking, both of them are walking up towards the lighthouse, but you see a couple other random, you know, sea hands. You see a couple of like other random dock workers that are unloading some stuff for them, and they don't get to talk, we don't know their names or anything like that. They're just there at the beginning. And then there's another shot of, you know, next as they make their way over some, you know, steep rocks, and then it shows them going to like the more grassy or even portion, and both people are Robert Pattinson and Dafoe. They're separate, they're walking separate towards the lighthouse. And then there's two obvious other lighthouse keepers that you would presume they're done with their shift, and they're leaving the island, obviously to you know, get on the boat and leave. And now these our two main characters are going to be taking over. Now, I like that little scene because if you notice, you know, Dafoe is walking ahead separately from Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson looks like he's got a heavier load. Dafoe's got his stuff, and they're both walking and they're distancing. They're away from each other. However, these two other lighthouse keepers that are leaving, that are done with their shift or whatever, they're both walking at the same time, at the same rate, and they're both helping each other. Like they both have a handle of like this chest or this crate. So it's sort of like this idea, and so little things like that, fascinating because it makes me read into it, and it makes me see like, okay, so our two characters from the beginning, even though they're supposed to be together, there's something separating them. However, these two other lighthouse keepers, they're perfectly normal guys. In fact, it shows the opposite of what these two, our main characters, deal with: camaraderie, teamwork, you know, harmony. Like these two are helping each other move the crate. They're walking alongside each other, and it's obvious that it's sort of like making a very, very tiny little simple show of the people that you're seeing leave at the beginning understand how to work together. But the two people going up that we're going to get the rest of the story with, they're not going to know how to work. There's something going on between them, or there's something between them that is keeping them at a distance, and it's not going to work out for them. The idea is that like teamwork and communication, those things are going to break down for them. it's that little scene, and then of course that's like on second or third viewing where you see like, okay, the two dudes are helping each other leave. The two main characters that it's going to be the rest of the story are separate, and then there's that beautiful shot of them like near the lighthouse. They're taking up most of the frame, and you think at first I thought like when you see it you think like, oh, they're staring at the camera. Is it supposed to be like an homage to an old-timey photograph? And you realize no, you see the ship on the horizon leaving. And then so you realize both of them were watching the ship leave. And there's something ominous about them realizing that the ship's gone and now it's just the two of us and we're now at work. Things happen. They have a hard time with certain things. They have an easy time with certain things. They have a hard time with certain things. But little moments like that make you go back and realize that there's a lot of thought into each shot, into each frame. And then there's other things too that go along the way. And there's themes that, like, okay, I mentioned there's separate moments where you get to see Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson jerking off on their own. And that's actually, like, those are the parts of the movie where I'm just like, okay, I don't, like, there is a part of me that's a little heteroflexible. I don't want to see either of these dudes actually jerk. I don't actually want to see men jerking off. You know what I mean? If you're, like, naked and doing something athletic, I don't know, maybe that's fine. But I don't actually want to see men. I don't want to see dicks. I don't want to see ejaculation like that. Leave that for the furry fantasies that I have. I don't want to see real human beings, especially in a live action movie, do that shit. But anyway, to touch on that, I mentioned Greek tragedies and stuff like that. One of the things I noticed with a lot of Greek stories, ancient Greek and Roman tales, there's this theme of fathers not really proud of their sons, fathers that are worried about their sons, fathers that are that even though they want to carry on their family name, there's a sense of pride and strength to that. They're worried that their sons at their peak are going to kill them and upend them. There's almost like and it goes back to, like, I guess the Titanomachy, where you have stories about divine sons and daughters killing their divine fathers and mothers. Zeus, having to kill his dad in order to save his siblings and things like that. It harkens back to that. So there's elements of, like, these two men, like Robert Pattinson is having to hide away in the shed and jerk off, like, in the dark, and his only gratification is, like, the fantasy of a woman who's not even a real normal woman. And yet you have Willem Dafoe, who has the privilege of seniority. He's literally high atop in the lighthouse. He literally gets to hang out with the magic warmth, the light, the utility, the whole reason they're there, the purpose, the majesty, the beauty, the power, the fear, the whatever is up there. He locks himself away with it. And there's a scene where, like, it establishes that Robert Pattinson, he fondles himself in the sheds, whatever. But then there's a scene where he's like, he creeps up into the lighthouse when it's at night, and Willem Dafoe is up there, and it's clear that he's naked. And it's almost like okay, first off, you know that he's doing something sexual, which means he's jerking off because he's by himself. But then you start hearing these weird noises. The camera even shows this glob of what it's obvious that it's Willem Dafoe's semen, like his character, like, drops down, and, like, Robert Pattinson realizes what that is, and he, like, takes a step back, trying not to make noise, but he's, like, looking up, and it's obviously naked Willem Dafoe, but then he starts seeing horrifying noises, and he sees things, and then you see, like, this giant like squid tentacle dragging across, and these horrifying noises, and yada yada yada. So it's a movie, and then so there's something unnerving about that, but there's also something primal about that, and it's as people, it kind of, again, there's something that unsettling but very primal, very real thing. As people, like, I'm a guy, I'm a horny guy. I've been a horny guy since I was 13 years old, and even before when I was a kid, I remember getting erections before I knew what they were. Like watching Godzilla stomp around the city and stuff like that, and breaking buildings, and something about that giant reptile breathing fire and smacking things with his tail, and he's like, 100 stories tall, or whatever. Before I even knew what sex was or any of that other kind of stuff, I remember getting erections about that. What does that mean? Who knows? But it's one of those things where, as a man, I know that it's like, I'm horny, and I know other men are horny. And like I just said earlier, I don't want to see men jerking off. I don't want to see men ejaculating. I don't want to see men actually having sex. whenever I watch porn, I honestly prefer to just watch women doing stuff. I don't like seeing a dick in there. If I see a dick, it's like I want that to be mine, but whatever. But we know. But here's the thing: we are all products of sexual energy. We are all products of sex. Our parents. I mean, and here's the thing: we don't want to think about this. There's something wrong. I don't say wrong. It's natural, but there's something that bothers people. They don't want to think about their dad or their mom having sex. They don't want to think about their other people in that position doing the same thing. There's something about that. And I think that also there's something about that kind of tension, which is maybe not overtly sexual, but like subtly sexual, of like symbolisms of like the manhood and penis and testicles and semen. And it's like, here you have the scene where like Robert Pattinson is weirdly coveting the fact that like he's literally underneath Willem Dafoe, his superior, not just in terms of position, but physically underneath him in this moment. And also he's older, so there's like senior, junior dichotomy. And yet Robert Pattinson is like, I have to jerk off in a shed. And then he looks up and realizes that there's something up there. And Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe's character is getting to make love to it. And you can tell that it always sets up that thing of he's like, I don't know what's going on up there, but there's a part of me that wants to go up there and take what this man has and make love to it. It's like, it's almost like the, men trying to kill other men and take their wives, even like back in ancient times. It's like, that's a thing. That's a very primal, real thing, a sociological thing, a human, thing about in regards to male aggression and who knows what. So there's weird little eerie moments like that in this movie. And even though parts like that aren't my favorite, it makes me think, and it harkens back to it. It's multi-layered. It's like my mind conjures up and explodes in all these different things, and it's like ancient Greek and Roman myths, and like my understandings of human psychology and sociology, and like culture clashes, and then basic yin and yang relationships, and like father-son relationships, and superior and inferior relationships and things like that. All these different things, and that's what's great about this movie, is that it harkens all to so many different little things that you have to look for. And of course the thing of hubris and killing the gulls and killing the birds and things like that. There's this, I kept saying Prometheus and Zeus, and it's like, well, it's obvious Robert Pattinson is a Promethean figure. He wants to take the fire from Zeus and maybe not bestow it, but do something with it. But he's not allowed to. And of course, by the end of the movie, he technically steals it, or at least somewhat kind of attempts to, and he's literally dashed against the rocks with the gulls pecking out his liver. So there's that, so it harkens back to that. And then there's a couple moments where Willem Dafoe has like a nice little monologue. Oh, technically not. Technically a monologue. Yeah, he's a nice little monologue. And the best one is where they're both drunk. They're both talking about their insecurities, and there's a part where, and again, it brings so many things into it. All of those elements, all of those subtext, the themes, and so on, where they're both drunk. Hold on, gin time. They're both drunk and yelling at each other and making fun of each other and shit. And then there's a part where like they both just kind of drunkenly kind of go, what? And then Robert Pattinson is like, that's my fucking problem with you. And then he lets out his problem. It's like it's a little thing in a way, but it makes him angry. It makes him stand up as he goes, I want a fucking steak. I want a bloody rare steak. And again, bloody steak, not a well done steak, not even like a refined, like a fancy. He doesn't even say like a fancy Frankish steak or something like that, or a French steak or Italian steak. No, he goes, I want a rare bloody. I just want a steak. So rare bloody steak, because I want a fucking steak. And then Willem Dafoe's character is like, oh, get the fuck out of here. And he's like, if I had a steak right now, Robert Pattinson's like, if I had a steak right now, I'd fuck it. Which is funny, but he's also making, but again, it's fun little symbolic, little read between the lines moments where he's like saying like he needs an out, he needs to have this bloody side satiated, if you wanted to read into it that way. But also, it's a very logistical, grounded thing where he's like, he even says, when I was a lumberjack, I was fed, fried donuts, 2 or 3 times a day in addition to all kinds of other stuff. you know, because they needed the calories. They needed to be able to burn all that shit and lift heavy logs and scale trees and, you know, swim and move stuff down, you know. So he's like, I want a rare bloody steak, and he's like, and I want good food. Damn it! In fact, if it was here, I would be so enjoyed by it that I would have sex with it. Like, you know, so again, themes of like men needing certain kinds of releases, right? So there's that. And then immediately Willem Dafoe hears that, and then in his drunk mind, he goes, "You don't like my cooking?" And it's almost like he's offended. And Robert Pattinson's like, "Oh, don't sound like an old bitch." And he throws a pillow at him, which, again, he throws a pillow. He says, "Don't be like an old bitch," and throws a pillow after he makes that comment. Pillows are not hard. Pillows are soft. Pillows are cushioning. Pillows are soft. Pillows are comfort. Pillows are what you lay on when you go to bed. It's, again, so he even makes, there's a layered moment right there where he's like, as a man, I want to fuck meat. I want meat so bad. I want blood. I need to satiate this bloodlust, this appetite that I have, and I can't. And then Willem Dafoe was like, "You're drunk. You wouldn't be saying that." He's like, "Don't act like an old bitch." And he attacks him, and he mentions, like, he makes a joke about in a feminine way by throwing a pillow at him. You know, there's this idea that, like, kids and, you know, women and girls have pillow fights or whatever. But, like, so he throws a pillow at him, and then he's like, "Don't be an old bitch." And then he's like, "You're drunk. You wouldn't be saying that. I know you like me cooking." And then he's like, "Your cooking sucks." And then Willem Dafoe, even more invested to get to, like, the, you know, to pop the zit, if you will. He's like, "What about my lobster?" You know, you can tell there's something about the lobster that he pulled up all the way, and he's like, "Yes, lobsters are like the treasures of the sea," and he makes it, and it's like, now, of course, you know, lobsters are more of like a delicacy food. They're a more higher end meat. But he's like, "What about my lobster? You like my lobster, don't you?" And Pats is like, "Your lobster sucks." And that causes Defoe to give this amazing monologue where he's like, "Hark!" He like stands up and he's like, "Hark!" He's like, "No! Hark, Triton! Hark, damn ye!" And then he goes off and he has this long, beautifully written, layered and just peppered and ingrained with, you know, things related to the sea and Davy Jones and Triton and Poseidon and Neptune and fish and aquatic things and predatory mammals like sharks and whales. And he even makes, like, you know, like, and he basically, it's almost like he's like cursing him, or he's threatening him to curse him, where he's like, "You need to tell me the truth right now, or I will send you into the sea. I will burst your gullet and, you know, your bilge-filled bladder and, you know, brackish," you know, like all these, this beautifully written monologue. Like, it's the kind of, and then he throws it at him, and then it's like he's standing and the camera's like facing up at him like this, and it's like dark and it's darkly lit. It's perfectly like Willem Dafoe's wrinkly, haunted face with his thick semen, like this thick sea captain's beard, and he's just like, you know, let Neptune strike ye dead, Winslow, you know, and he's like, you know, and then he like, and there's like remnants of other things that's like things that maybe he was referencing, like horrors and tales of the deep and Greek, like ancient mariners' legends, and there's and the way he delivers it, it's almost like he's like, it's almost like he's seen horrifying things and he's like throwing it off of him, and then he ends with like, you know, "Forgotten any man, forgotten any time," like, or like, "You'll be forgotten even to the sea. You'll be now just itself that, and, you know, be worn away by it." And, you know, and also, like, water is the universal solvent. Anything that goes in there will eventually, over time, get broken down by it, because that's just the mystery and the power of the ocean and water. And so, but he throws like this great monologue at him, and then it comes, and he's like standing over like drunk Arpats, and Arpats is looking at him, and then finally goes, "All right, have it your way. I like your cooking." And that's the end of the scene. And it's like, that's funny. It's like a really, really intense moment, and then it has like a little bit of comedy at the end of it, like, and then like the cherry on top, and it's funny. But just that monologue is great. In fact, that monologue, this movie, it's like, I kind of took a break from acting a couple years ago, just because a lot of shit was not going right in my life and a lot of complications. And this movie actually kind of made me want to get up and say, "Screw it. I'm gonna put on The Lighthouse as a stage play," or like, I'm gonna do a one-man, like The Lighthouse, a one-man act starring me, and just give that monologue. Like part of me just wanted to get up and perform it. That's how powerful. And part of it is the writing, and part of it is the shot, but 75% of it, most of it, is Willem Dafoe's performance of it, you know, and it's great, and he embodies it. Moments like that are rewarding, and there's these layered moments that make you go, exactly what's going on here, because it can't be as simple as that. It's just two lighthouse keepers. No, as it goes along, it makes you question things. And then there's other associations. I talked about gods and goddesses, but what I find interesting is, you know, you have this this other situation of it's the relationship, and again, a very old world, pre-biblical, where there was this, and again, very like, again, I hate saying Greek and Greco-Roman and shit like that, but that's the easiest way to just simplify it. A lot of those stories involve how mortals and gods don't really interact well. And I think the Lighthouse harkens back to that. Again, harkens back to that. Because here you have the situation where it's like, Willem Dafoe is the god and Robert Pattinson is the mortal man. You see Willem Dafoe, he seems to just know everything. He's done everything. He's older. He seems to be smarter, wiser. Not necessarily physically more capable, but it's implied that because our Pat's mortal man is having such a hard time even just doing all the basics of chores and things you need to do around a lighthouse and working the giant foghorn and cleaning the machinery and even just taking care of the house where they live, things like that. It's sort of implied that he is more powerful. So Willem Dafoe's character is literally the old world god. And of course, he is like, I tend to the light. You don't touch the light. So it's, again, you know, Zeus in the flame and telling Prometheus, don't do that. Stay away from it. But here's the thing. It's not just a matter of power and even arrogance. Because, you know, obviously, naturally, the powerful entity should be the one handling the more problematic job. The weaker one should be dealing with the less problematic job. Just in a basic, definitive, neutral way, right? So the thing of Robert Pattinson is struggling, he's, you know, busting his ass, doing all kinds of stuff, like moving stuff around, moving coal, painting stuff, polishing and wiping things down and scraping things off. And he's doing labor that's like really, really tough. Willem Dafoe is like, well, it's implied that he's done that and he knows what he's doing and he's mastered that. That's why he's the senior lighthouse guy. But it's also just, again, that idea that he is a god, Pattinson is a mortal man, and they covet, you know, as mortals, we want to ascend to godhood in some way. We want to be as powerful, as capable, as hierarchical, whatever that term is. We want to be important. We want to be important. We want to be powerful. We want to be not necessarily responsible, but we want to be in charge in some ways. We want to be leaders or at minimum experts of something. But more importantly, we want to strive. There is something human about wanting to strive to not necessarily even be the best, but sort of take over, like you can even symbolically say, like we want to take over our father's position to pay respect to him, but also to prove to ourselves we can do it better, right? So there's a situation similar to that. Even though we know it's not his dad and son, it's a similar relationship. So it's this idea of mortal man wants to do what the gods can do. However, there's a bunch of weird little dark things along the way, like what exactly is in the light at the top of the lighthouse? Is it something that only the gods can combat? Is there something dark and sinister and evil and chthonic up in the lighthouse that you need the power of the gods to be able to handle? Mortal man can't handle it. And in fact, after mortal man, you know, dabbles with curses, i.e. the seagulls, and even commits hubris by killing Willem Dafoe's character, i.e. the god, in order to get to the power of what they covet, or what they handle, the realm of what they do and how they operate, he finally gets up there, he gets to interact with the light, and it's too powerful for him, and he dies because of it. He's Icarus who flew too close to the sun, he's Prometheus with the light. So it's interesting because it kind of brings, at the end of it, it kind of makes you think, you know, like right then and there, or even the next day, you're like, you know, it's funny, what if Robert Pattinson just said, you know what, it's fine, you work with the light, I'm not going to worry about it. That ambition probably wouldn't have killed him. That ambition probably would have led him to have a better time. That ambition, and again, it's sort of, Robert Pattinson is a flawed mortal man who he has to combat he has to keep his combat, not his combat, sorry. He has to keep his aggression in check. He has to keep his sexuality in check. He has to keep his lust in check, his envy in check. He has to keep his cardinal sins in check. He's a human man, just like all of us, that have to overcome things like, you know, anger, regrets, fear, uncertainty, sadness, arrogance, meekness even, and certain, and when to say yes sir, but also when to say no sir. Things like that, like that we learn over time. So our Robert Pattinson really does embody and also notice that even though both of them by the end of it are drinking like crazy and smoking and things like that, but notice how Robert Pattinson is smoking for most of the movie, whereas our sea captain isn't. I mean, you see him with a pipe, but he's not smoking all the time. So I think it sort of implies, again, Robert Pattinson is a baser human being. He's a mortal man who has to contend with base desires and things to sort of keep him going. He has to drug certain things in order to keep himself going. He looks forward to pleasures more so than deeper things. Even though he does talk about, and then also when he talks when Willem Dafoe, who you can tell it's the fact that this old timer would want to be here and keep doing that, loves it. He's, I don't say passionate, but he even says now, oh, sorry, I moved my laptop here. He's like, now I'm a wiki I is. And then he asked Ephraim Winslow, who we don't realize is Thomas Howard yet. He's like, what brought you to this lighthouse? What made you want to do this job? And then Robert Pattinson's like, well, I used to be a lumberjack ever since I left Dad. I've done a variety of jobs. And then he starts to hint at he had to leave and things aren't quite right. And then Thomas Wake even hints at are you a drifter? And he's like, are you on the run from the law? And then the way Robert Pattinson reacts is now look here. I think that sometimes people make mistakes, or there's nothing wrong with going after and trying to find your calling in life. You can tell it's that little, there's a little moment there. Something is deeper, something is going on. We need to uncover it. But it's also the wisdom of an older man, the wisdom of the gods versus the ignorance or only the limited knowledge of mortal man. You see the conflict right there. And the fact that this old timer's got that, he asks him so what brought you over here? And then he says, well, I mean, outside of the there's something that hasn't been uncovered yet. He says what I want to do is I just want to find a simple job. I want to save up. And then he says, I want to work, save up, make a decent amount of money, so that way I can go build a house, start a family, and just be by myself and not have anybody tell me what to do and what not to do, and live on my own. So in a way, he's almost saying I want to live this hermit style, not necessarily not hermetic, but hermit. He wants to live this hermit lifestyle. But then we kind of go, is it that he wants to be a hermit? But then he says so that way people won't tell me what to do, or people can't order me around all day. So it's aha, look, there's something small there too. He has a problem with he has issues with authority. And, of course, that comes back later when Willem Dafoe is you've been shirking your duties. Don't deny it. You're going to scrub this floor. And then he tells him, the next cuts to the house. And he's like, you didn't scrub the floor enough. And the guy's like, I scrubbed it twice over. And I tried really hard. Also, this place sucks. And he goes, screw you. You're not going to contradict me. I'm in charge. I say you didn't. And you're going to swab. And he's like, swab, dog. Swab. And again, insults like the word dog, like what he keeps calling him, comes back at the end and kind of bites him in the ass. So things like that. So he tells him, you've been neglecting your duties. You need to scrub harder. You need to work harder. You need to scrub. It's this job isn't, basically he implies this isn't an easy job, but you're going to do it because that's what you're getting paid to do. Damn it. And it's sort of like when we're kids and our parents tell us, go clean your room. And you're like, I don't want to. What's the point? It's technically in a way it might not be a problem. It might not be. But it's also the idea of rebellion against authority. Sometimes it's childish, sometimes, and then here it's implied that it's because we don't know enough, i.e. we're ignorant like children, or we don't know any better. It's implied that it's well, it seems it's a parent yelling at a kid, but it could just as easily be a divine father yelling at the divine son kind of situation as well. Definitely not in a biblical sense. Much more in a very old-timey, ancient world sense. Anyway, but there's other things too that pop up that some things that I'm not a fan of. So early on, I mentioned dog. So there's a part where there's a few times early on where Willem Dafoe insults him and calls him your dog. How dare you contradict me, you dog? And then Robert Pattinson confesses. He's what's his name? Ephraim Winslow was insulting me. Tom, you dog. And so it's obvious that kind of for some reason that kind of just ate at him or bit him, like a dog. But then at the end, when they get into their epic fight, and Robert Pattinson knocks him over, and he's like, bark like a dog. He's like, bark like a dog. And then the next scene, which I would argue is the weakest scene in the movie, or at least the lead up to it is weak, and it comes away from a tangible story to a much more obvious obvious symbolism and stuff like that, where he's taking Willem Dafoe outside. He has a leash around his neck, or like he has a rope around his neck, like a leash, and Willem Dafoe's walking on all fours, and then he's like, "Come on, dog, lie in your grave," and he literally throws him in the grave, and Willem Dafoe's lying there, and then it cuts. But then, so that right there made me go, "Okay, really, really, are you like the audience who's watching this movie is not that dumb? Come on, man." To me, it kind of breaks the veneer, personally, but it's fine, whatever. So then, it immediately cuts to, but it immediately transitions and smoothly goes into Willem Dafoe's getting buried alive while he's basically giving like this death, his own eulogy, and basically lamenting over his woes and his miseries, but also kind of in a way cursing and insulting Pattinson as he's burying him, and he's like, and he the last thing he says is, "You'll be punished." It's sort of like, oh, okay, well, something that means that, okay, he just sort of embodied like, this isn't going to be a happy ending, period, which is interesting because he's right. As soon as he does that, now, okay, then and that this part, so he does the thing with he leads him on the leash like a dog. I feel like is weak, but then Willem Dafoe gives a great monologue while he's being buried alive, and then he dies. It's implied that symbolically he died. Again, rough symbol, in-your-face symbolism versus subtlety symbolism that the movie just kind of goes into, whatever. So, and then at that point, Tom Howard crawls in, grabs the keys, and then the next shot is he's at the base of the lighthouse looking up into the staircase, the spiral stairway, and then he doesn't go up it immediately, which is interesting. He doesn't go up it immediately. Instead, he goes back into the kitchen, and he's like, "I could use," and at the moment of, "I could use me a smoke." He said earlier when he talked about watching his old boss die or drown, he's like, the only thing I thought was I could use me a smoke. So again, the idea of he smokes, well, I would argue that that's funny. He smokes a lot throughout the movie, but in this case, it was very much like a reward, like a congratulatory smoke. And then as soon as he does it, behind him, Willem Dafoe comes in. Doesn't even look like he crawled out of the grave, but he comes in with the axe, and he's like, "The lighthouse is mine," or something like that. And then he axes him in like his arm. He axes him in his arm, and then Tom quickly like grabs a lantern and smacks him upside the head, and then Willem Dafoe gets knocked to the ground, and then he grabs the axe and then buries it in his skull. And it's like, okay, I'm sitting there going like, so you just buried him symbolically in the dirt, and but then he comes out of nowhere, and then you symbolically, but then you very viciously re-kill him, this time with a legit axe. And I'm sitting there going like, why? What? I'm like, okay, time out. From the standpoint of storytelling, one of them is visceral, one of them is symbolic. One of them is very like noticeably violent, in your face, very tangible. The other is theatrical, Lynchian, and interpretive. But the fact that they have both and then like one right next to the other, to me made me go like, okay, time out. I don't like that. To me, it's rough. To me, it's a little underthought, and I kind of feel like it's unnecessary to do it that way. That's one. I will say that is the one thing about this movie. I mean, outside of seeing two men jerk off in different angles, the one thing about this movie I would have changed is that part near the end. I would have had it to where he should have just came in, or like what should have happened is they should have gotten into a fight. He axes him, or like they get into a fight, they get into a struggle, and then Dafoe grabs the axe in the struggle and says, "The lighthouse belongs to me." And then Winslow catches it, they wrestle, and then they fall back on, and then Pattinson gets a hold of the axe and manages to go and smacks Tom Wake in the head enough to give him, like, I hate to say it, but like enough to give him brain damage. And then in the midst of that, maybe it would have been like where at that point our Pats, is like, it's like, oh yeah, like, yeah, he said, I didn't even have to say anything. He could just at that point start berating him and going like, "You son of a bitch, why'd you make me do it? You're the dog now. You know what? You're the dog. Can you hear me in there? Why don't you bark like a dog? Bark!" And then with what mental capacity is left, Willem Dafoe could have actually started barking like a dog at that point, and then it could have gone into the thing of, he's got a wound in his head. That's when he cuts to the next scene where our Pats is leading him out, on all fours, and I would say that would not only, it's a thing of, he wounds him in the head so that he can't do or do anything normal, and that would have just been enough, and then it would have also led into, it would have naturally led into this symbolic death, and we would have had his character lying, in this grave, and he's burying him alive because he's like, you know what, I just axed this guy in the head, he's gonna bleed to death anyway. Let me just have him walk there like a dog into the grave, and then roll him in there, and then as he's burying him alive, he stops making dog noises, and then suddenly starts giving this monologue again that maybe causes Robert Pattinson to stop for a second and go, oh crap, what if this guy's, is this guy still alive, or is he giving me a death curse? What is this? And then the guy, Robert Pattinson, but he doesn't know what to do because he's shocked at that point. And then Willem Dafoe gives that dying eulogy monologue / curse, insult, reckoning back thing, whatever. A reckoning. Screw it, we'll just call it that. It's fine. And then buried him alive with that, and then, grabbed it, and then made sure to just show him reaching into the dirt and grabbing his keys. Would have been fine. It would have been a healthy balance between showing something tangible, but also showing something artistic and symbolic and interpretive. Something that's metaphorical, as opposed to just doing we're going to do a fight, and then we're going to show a metaphorical death, but then we're immediately going to go back to a rough and very tangible, very palpable death, and then just leave it there. I'm just for some reason, to me, that kind of felt like, I don't know if maybe it's just maybe it could be a thing where I'm missing, there's a reference to that somewhere, there's a point to it, and from the writer's standpoint that I just don't get. I'll freely admit that, but to me it seems like when something flows smoothly and goes great, from A to B, the one time there's a pothole, you notice there's a pothole in the road. You still get to point B, but it's just when there's a pothole and you boom, run into it, it's jarring, it's noticeable, is what I'm trying to get at. So that's the one thing about the movie that I don't like. I kind of get why it's there. Anyway, but it's the one thing about it that I really want to criticize, because up to that point, I was like, okay, everything means something. Everything is showing something. Even the parts where they're kind of questioning each other's sanity and insulting each other and contradicting each other, and it goes back to that identity theme, is great. But then when you get to the end, you kind of need to show the end in a way that makes sense, or you need to show the end in a way that we understand this being a wrap up. But showing okay, he wraps it up and they build up and they do this great symbolic death, and they should have just left it there. But then it immediately, within the next 2 minutes, it cuts back to, no, he's not dead. He's going to come at you with an axe, and then now you got to kill him. Okay, so now he's dead. And then the only thing that you get out of it is that you're now covered in blood, but you could have easily been covered in blood beforehand. Anyway, it's just one of those things of, I don't think, that's literally the one rough spot in this movie that I don't like. Everything else is perfect, or at least interesting and beautifully dark and fun to interpret. Very weirdly allegorical. It's interesting. I enjoy it. It's great. One rough spot, but fine. That's fine. I know that I don't know if I want to mention, I guess I'll mention the farts. I know there was a thing where since the old guy's farting, is sort of making a joke off of the older folks not having control, I guess, over their, bowels, or maybe it's just a joke on how older men sometimes get into that work life or that work zone that's very masculine. I guess I'll say that it's culturally, it seems like women are not allowed to fart. Men are allowed to fart. Women are not allowed to belch. Men are allowed to belch. And of course, nowadays, it's it's fine. Who gives a crap? I mean, there's still people that are kind of locked in that traditional sense. This idea that old men are just going to they've worked hard and earned the right to fart and belch wherever they want. I got that kind of symbolism from it. And then of course, there's even little moments in there where Pats is freaking out and yelling at him I'm tired of you, Captain Ahab bullshit. I'm tired of your lobster. I'm tired of your farts, your goddamn farts. And there's something about it that's visceral and, again, grounding. It's well, he's been farting. Willem Dafoe, this old man, knowing this grizzled sea captain, has been farting throughout the movie. And it's supposed to be dark humor. So, and then he calls him out on it. And they're like, that's funny. Okay, well, there's something grounding about that because we've been around old guys that do that kind of stuff. You know, my grandfather does that. You know, still. And anyway, but I think at some point, when I started to form the opinion of, okay, well, the farts, even though they're kind of like, yeah, farts are gross and funny, but it's sophomoric humor, it's scatological humor. Even that had an element that kind of made sense to be in this movie. And then I listened to the director's commentary by Robert Eggers. And then when the beginning, when he mentioned his commentary on the farts is, he's like, yeah, a lot of people thought that The Witch was really, really bleak and miserable. And so we decided to have Willem Dafoe, we decided to have his character occasionally fart to sort of bring some levity into the movie. You know, I guess, and then he says to show a different kind of misery for Robert Pattinson's character. And I was like, so you're mainly doing it for it's like, so you're mainly doing it for comedy purposes. I kind of feel like working harder on like an actual joke or even jocular moments is better payoff than just having this old guy fart sometimes. But I don't know. That's just me, though. Maybe I'm just, I don't know. Maybe that's a question for you guys, whoever's watching this, whoever's listening to this. If you thought that that was necessary, if you thought that that was unnecessary, comment in the at the bottom here. How did you feel about Willem Dafoe's farting in the movie, or the characters farting in the movie? Because to me, I feel like Robert Eggers and the people putting this together don't quite understand what good comedy is. Like, that's cheap comedy. It works, but it's like this movie is very artsy. It's beautiful. Hell, they even chose a very specific, like, you know, picture, like a frame, or they even chose a very specific aspect ratio, very old-timey aspect ratio for this movie, and it's even color-coded black and white. Like, there's no hues except black and white in the entire movie. So the fact that they were willing to make that decision on a technical level, on an artistic level, and yet they were like, well, we need to have some comedy moments outside of what's the just raw comedy moments in the movie. Let's have this old guy farting. Really? Really? All right, you know what, whatever, it's fine. The movie does 9 out of 10 things right. I can't criticize it for not doing one thing wrong. I mean, I can, but there's no point. There's no point because I've watched The Lighthouse several times, and it's not like it bothered me so much. Like I just said earlier, I can't watch The Witch ever again. I'm kind of glad I watched it, but I don't ever want to see it again. I've rewatched The Lighthouse several times. There's something interesting and stimulating and intellectual and art and soulful about seeing it, and the fun of trying to crack this code. Like my left brain's trying to crack the code. My right brain is trying to enjoy the beauty and the madness that is in and went into the thought behind the story, and the intensity of these actors that went into it. Anyway, there's something fun about it. I've rewatched it several times, so I definitely am recommending it. I'm giving The Lighthouse 13 out of... I'm giving it 13 out of 13 seagulls. That's how good this movie is. Darn good and hot, like the way Agent Cooper would say it. Now, I can keep rambling about other things, but in all sincerity, I think I basically brought out my criticisms and all the stuff I want to say. And my voice is getting kind of tired. It's like over 2 hours, and there's a lot I wanted to say about it. A lot of thinking over and over and over about The Lighthouse, and then some on The Witch too. And I was like, I'm going to put together a double feature for this video and talk about both movies that by the up and coming and accredited filmmaker Robert Eggers. I don't know what his next project is going to be. I am curious to know what it will be about. And if I have friends that are more than likely going to drag me to go see the movie. Otherwise, I'm like, I don't know. The Lighthouse, I'm glad I liked it now. I don't know if I would have liked it in theaters. But then again, who knows? It's about circumstance, right? Sometimes. When I saw The Joker a few months ago, I would have had a much better viewing experience for that movie if, for the first half of the movie, I wasn't both pissed off but also really nervous because this weirdo drunk dude happened to sat down next to me and my mother. And so now when I think back to The Joker, I think back to some parts of it, but like I can only think back to the last half of the movie. The first half of it was me the entire time going, is this guy drunk, or is this guy waiting to start a fight with somebody? Am I going to get shot? What the fuck's going on here? So yeah, sometimes, I hate to say it, sometimes our viewing experience, when it doesn't go well, it will bias our viewing experience. It will bias how we perceive the movie. I remember Mike DeCosta on, and have I talked about this in a previous video? Screw it, I'll do it just in case. Red Letter Media years ago when Thor, I think it was Thor Ragnarok, when that came out, Mike DeCosta and Jay Bowman did their Half in the Bag special on Red Letter Media. You can watch on YouTube, which shout out to those guys, they're awesome. Mike started off, he goes, in terms of this movie experience, I need to say I'm crabby, Jay. And Jay starts laughing. He's like, okay, Mike, why are you crabby? He goes, well, I had a shitty experience. Basically, he said, he went on to go, I had a shitty experience at this movie. There was puke on the floor when I was walking in. It smelled really, really bad. I was sitting next to this guy who would not shut the fuck up. And then opposite to us was this other guy who was noticeably picking his nose. And it was just really distracting and gross. And it made me go, I don't want to go back to the movies for a while because it was that bad of an experience. But of course, they went back to the movies since then. But it's the same thing. It happens. Circumstance will sometimes dictate our very human opinions of something. And it's at that point, it's hard to be objective. And I would argue that as long as you're fairly acknowledging that, you know what, I can't be objective here, that's way better. That's actually more objective than just saying, oh, I hated this movie. It was gross and it was stupid. Movie theater was bad. I'm just gonna fuck it. I don't even care. Like it's not really objective, you know. But if you're willing to admit your bias, I would argue that's probably way more important. Anyway, so yeah, the Vavitch, I don't ever want to watch again. The Lighthouse, I have no problem watching as many times, you know, in the future as I can fit in. It's a great movie. Highly recommend it. If you weren't able to catch it when it was out, and by the time you watch this video, you're going to have to find it streaming or get your own copy of it. And I highly recommend it. It's a good movie. It may not be for everybody. I was trying to think what audiences. I mean, first off, if you want original films, you got to see this. If you want to see either of these two actors, like you're fans of them and you want to see them deliver interesting performances, you definitely got to see this. If you want to see a period piece, this is definitely an immersive period piece, again, minus the psychological, potentially supernatural elements involved here, but I would argue they're far more psychological and artistic than just within that context it can be categorized as supernatural, but just by comparison. It's a good period piece. The dialogue is great. The performance is awesome. The fact that it's shot in such a weird, very different aspect ratio, and the fact that it's black and white, I don't want to say it's gimmicky at all. In fact, I think it's worth it. So if you haven't got a chance to check it out yet, go see it. So with that said, I'm going to end this video now. Let me just gin time, wet my whistle a little bit. Oh boy, I need that. So with that said, I want to end this video. Done rambling, done talking, done giving my 2 cents on the whole thing. I guess technically it's 2 cents for this movie, 2 cents for that movie. So it's technically 4 cents. It's 4 pennies altogether. I'm done with that. It's not even a good joke. So, I want to leave off by just asking you guys, you people who are watching this, ask you questions overall. First off, what did you think about the Vavitch? How did you like it? What did you take away from it? What are your criticisms of it? Would you recommend it and why? And then same thing for the Lighthouse. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What would you have changed about it? What do you think it means? I know the Sardonicast guys, I was listening to them talk about this movie. This was before I had gotten a chance to watch it. But I watched their video of it, and I think one of them, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Ralph. It might have been... Anyway, one of the Sardonicast guys was like, should we allow the question, what is in the lighthouse? Or what is in the light? Or, no, you know what, in fact, let's not do that. And I was like, no, that's a valid question. That's a valid question. I think, in fact, I think not only is that a valid question, the movie is called The Lighthouse. Yes, the lighthouse it's an actual lighthouse, but it's also a metaphor. But I don't think there's anything cheap or unfulfilling about asking the question of what was in the light. Was it simply something that his character wasn't supposed to see? Or was it his saving grace or his salvation? Was it him admitting that he was just a shitty person and then not necessarily, maybe like metaphorically committing suicide so he could be reborn as something else? And we're seeing the vestiges or what's the remnants of his really shitty self being given the death that it deserved, and then yet his soul can go elsewhere, or something? Or is it just a think piece that takes place all in this guy's head, symbolically and very artistically working out, you know, making a lifelong terrible decisions, or running away from guilt or regret or harm or who knows what? It actually, before I forget, because I'll forget this note too, The Lighthouse reminds me of The Machinist with Christian Bale. It came out years ago, right before he was cast to do, right before he put out the Batman Begins film and got to do the Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan and shit. The Machinist, again, spoilers for The Machinist. If you don't want to know about it, stop it here. The Machinist is like this guy who, there's obviously something going on, and then by the end of it, you realize that his reality and his take on reality and his memory was warped, because technically he was trying to uncover his guilt, or he had to unmask his guilt for accidentally running over a little kid, but it was a narrative involving some of those people in his head. And so anyway, The Lighthouse kind of reminds me of The Machinist. It's like, when your reality is warped, when mental illness sets in because of life circumstances or your own choices, or a combination of both, or whatever. So anyway, that's all I got to say. What did you think about The Lighthouse? Feel free to comment in the link below. Like this video if you liked it. I'm sorry that it went kind of like almost to the 2.5 hour mark here, but I have a lot to say and a lot to ramble on, and I hope people get something out of it. And if you don't, that's fine too. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. I'm not sure what my next video is going to be. I never really quite know. I did get a little pissy when I was thinking back to the Fantastic Beasts movies and the Harry Potter trilogy. So I might consider putting efforts towards doing a video about the Harry Potter movies. Not so much the books, because I've really read very little of the book. I read like the first book and a little bit of 2 or 3 or something. And so I'm going to be talking about the movies, and definitely talk about why I fucking hate the Fantastic Beast movies for a variety of reasons. And honestly, people better than I have probably criticized it, but you know what? Screw it. What's the fun? You gotta have fun making these videos, and that's what I want to talk about, damn it. So anyway, so that may be my next video, unless something else pops up. In the meantime, Robert Eggers, I wish you the best as a filmmaker. I hope you put out, constantly, I hope you can consistently put out gold. I didn't like the Beach, and I love The Lighthouse, so can't wait to see what comes out next for you. And also, word of recommendation on the off chance you happen to be listening to this, and if people happen to get to him somehow, or know him, or comment, or retweet crap, whatever, Robert Eggers, the next time you do a director's commentary, please have the screenwriter there with you to balance out the commentary. It's not just you and your Joel voice. Talk about, we need somebody there to talk about the themes and the beauty and the depth and the things of the story. Like you just talking about, well, it was really difficult lighting this movie. Okay, that like some people will appreciate it, but I'm listening to the commentary to get a lot more insight into the movie and the story and the characters. Not the technical shit is like, I can look that up. Have your brother, screw it. If you and your brother collaborate in the future, you and your brother next time need to both host the commentary or the DVD commentary or whatever, whenever that movie's done with. There, said it. Done deal. That's all I got to say. Anyway, thanks to those of you who watch this video. Thanks to fans. Thanks to my friends who motivate me to put these things out. I don't expect these to go anywhere, but you know what? Screw it. At least I'm putting something out. So anyway, there you go. Like and subscribe. Appreciate it. Otherwise, yeah, it's bad luck to kill a seabird. That's one thing to take away from that movie. So definitely stay away from killing the seabirds in your life, whatever they may be. Oh, and, drink responsibly and stuff like that. Follow your dreams. All right, I'm seriously done.